The courtroom was eerily quiet, a tension thick in the air. It was a high-profile trial, one that everyone in the country was watching. The case was one of the most publicized in recent history, involving none other than the eccentric billionaire Elon Musk, the man who had revolutionized space travel, electric cars, and the way we think about technology was now standing in the midst of a courtroom battle that would determine not only his future but the very direction of his empire. Elon Musk, known for his confident and somewhat unpredictable nature, walked into the courtroom with a calm, almost nonchalant air about him. His usual relaxed demeanor contrasted sharply with the seriousness of the occasion. The room was packed, journalists, lawyers, and even curious onlookers, all eager to witness the spectacle. Musk wasn't just a billionaire entrepreneur. He was a symbol of innovation and controversy. People either loved him or hated him, but no one could deny his influence. As he took his seat at the defense table, a few whispered conversations began to spread throughout the room. Musk, who had been embroiled in various public controversies over the years, was no stranger to the spotlight. But this time, things were different. This was a legal battle with far-reaching consequences. The charges against him were serious, and many speculated that this could be the end of Musk's reign in the tech world. The opposing counsel, a sharp-dressed attorney with a reputation for being ruthless, glanced over at Musk with a look of disdain. He had been preparing for this day for months, and he was confident that the case was airtight. But little did he know, the man sitting across from him wasn't going to go down without a fight. The judge, an older man with glasses perched on the edge of his nose, called the court to order. He was known for his no-nonsense approach, and his stern gaze swept over the room, silencing any remaining chatter. It was clear this was not going to be a simple case. The stakes were high, and everyone knew it. Elon sat quietly, his gaze fixed ahead. His mind was not on the court or the people in it. Instead, it was on something else, something that would soon become clear to everyone in the room. He had a plan, one that no one was prepared for. The trial began with the prosecution laying out their case, citing a series of legal violations and breaches of trust. Musk, they argued, had knowingly made false statements, misled investors, and put his companies at risk. They painted him as a reckless entrepreneur, a man who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals, regardless of the consequences. The courtroom was filled with murmurs as the prosecutor continued, making Musk out to be a villain in the eyes of the public. But Elon Musk wasn't just any defendant. He wasn't going to sit there and let himself be painted into a corner. He wasn't going to let his legacy be defined by a courtroom. He knew that his actions, his decisions, and his life had always been larger than any one case, larger than any one moment in time. As the prosecution continued their case, Musk remained still, his face betraying no emotion. But the tension in the room was palpable. His reputation was on the line, and the world was watching. Yet, in this moment, he appeared calm. It was as if the weight of the accusations had no effect on him. And then, in an instant, everything changed. The prosecutor had just made another scathing remark, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. The audience seemed to feed off his confidence, their eyes glued to Musk, waiting for a reaction. But Musk's response was not what anyone expected. He slowly reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small leather wallet. He took his time, his movements deliberate and unhurried, almost as if he were enjoying the drama unfolding around him. The tension in the room grew thick. The audience leaned in, curious about what Musk was doing. And then, with a slow and deliberate motion, he pulled out a badge. The badge gleamed under the bright lights of the courtroom, and for a moment, everything went silent. The world seemed to stop as everyone in the room tried to process what was happening. The badge was unmistakable. It was a United States Secret Service (USSS) badge. The reaction was instant. The room, which had been buzzing with nervous energy just moments ago, was now frozen in disbelief. The prosecutor's face went pale, his smug grin faltering as he tried to comprehend what he was seeing. Even the judge, usually unflappable, seemed to pause for a fraction of a second before regaining his composure. The audience, which had been whispering and murmuring throughout the trial, now sat in stunned silence. No one dared to speak. Elon Musk, the man who had faced down rockets, artificial intelligence, and even the relentless pressure of the media had just revealed something that no one expected. He wasn't just a businessman. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was someone with access to the highest levels of government protection. The judge, whose expression had been stern and authoritative, now appeared somewhat rattled. He cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses, his hands shaking slightly as he glanced down at the badge. The room was still silent, the weight of the moment settling in. Musk leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest, as if daring anyone to question him. He was no longer just a man in a courtroom. He was someone with the power to stop this trial in its tracks. And at that very moment, it became clear to everyone that this case was no longer just about the law. It was about something far larger, something far more powerful. As the judge struggled to regain his composure, Musk simply looked around the room, his eyes scanning the faces of the people who had once laughed at him, who had doubted him, who had thought they could bring him down. But this time, Musk wasn't the one being laughed at. And as the judge's gaze shifted from the badge back to Musk, there was a brief flicker of something in his eyes. Fear, perhaps. Or maybe it was respect. But whatever it was enough to make everyone in the room pause. For a moment, no one knew what would happen next. Would the judge continue with the trial? Would the prosecutor push forward with his case? Or had Elon Musk just turned the tide in ways no one could have predicted? The courtroom was on the edge of its seat, and for the first time in this trial, no one was laughing. What had just happened in that room was not just an ordinary court proceeding. It was the beginning of something much bigger, something that would send shockwaves through the entire world. As the tension hung in the air, one question lingered in everyone's mind. Why had Elon Musk just shown his USSS badge? The answer to that question would change everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk was not just a billionaire entrepreneur. He was a phenomenon. He had built an empire from the ground up, starting with nothing but a passion for technology and an unwavering belief in his vision. Over the years, he had transformed industries, disrupted markets, and even sent rockets to space. But behind the headlines, behind the world-changing ideas, there was a side of Musk that very few people understood. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon Musk had always been driven. From a young age, he was fascinated by technology, constantly tinkering with computers and electronics. His parents, a model and an engineer, encouraged his interests, and Musk soon found himself enrolled in the best schools. But his life wasn't without its struggles. Musk was often the target of bullying at school, a solitary figure who preferred books to socializing. He didn't quite fit in with the crowd, and the other kids often didn't understand him. At the age of 17, Elon moved to Canada to attend Queen's University, but his goal wasn't just to earn a degree, it was to change the world. He knew that America was the land of opportunity, and after 2 years at Queen's, he transferred to the University of Pennsylvania. It was there that he first started to develop his ideas for revolutionizing the tech industry. It was during these years that his ambitions grew, and Musk began to think big, bigger than anyone had dared to imagine at the time. After graduating, Musk launched his first company, Zip2, a software company that provided business directories and maps for newspapers. It wasn't the grand vision he had in mind, but it was the beginning of something that would shape his entire career. He eventually sold Zip2 for nearly $300 million, and that's when he made his first big move. The next step was X.com, which would later become PayPal. While others in the financial sector dismissed the idea of online payments, Musk saw the potential for a completely new financial system. PayPal quickly became a household name, and in 2002, eBay purchased it for $1.5 billion in stock. Musk's life had changed overnight, but he wasn't finished yet. He had bigger plans in mind. It wasn't long before Musk turned his sights to space. In 2002, he founded SpaceX with the mission of reducing the cost of space travel and making it possible for humans to live on other planets. While SpaceX faced numerous setbacks, including multiple rocket failures, Musk's persistence paid off. In 2008, SpaceX successfully launched its first Falcon 9 rocket into orbit, and the company's future was sealed. But Musk didn't stop there. In 2004, he founded Tesla Motors, later rebranded as simply Tesla, with the goal of making electric vehicles mainstream. The path to success was anything but easy. Tesla faced criticism, financial instability, and numerous obstacles. But Musk's vision for a sustainable future and his relentless drive kept the company moving forward. Today, Tesla is one of the most valuable automakers in the world, and Musk is considered one of the most influential people in the tech world. Despite his many achievements, Musk had always been a controversial figure. His unconventional leadership style, his tweets, and his outspoken opinions had made him a target for criticism. But he was also a figure who commanded respect, especially within the tech industry. He was someone who could turn a seemingly impossible idea into a reality, someone who would take risks that others wouldn't dare to take. But there was another side to Musk, a side that few people saw. Beneath the bravado and the larger-than-life persona, there was a man who struggled with self-doubt, anxiety, and the immense pressure of constantly being in the public eye. His personal life, too, had been turbulent. His relationships and marriages were often scrutinized by the media, and he faced criticism for his sometimes erratic behavior. However, one thing remained constant in Musk's life: his drive to change the world. He wasn't just in it for the money. He was in it to make a lasting impact on humanity. His goal was always bigger than profits. He wanted to leave a legacy, to do something that would transcend time. Whether it was launching humans into space, creating sustainable energy solutions, or reshaping the automotive industry, Musk was determined to be remembered as someone who had changed the course of history. The events leading up to this courtroom drama were no different. Musk had been facing immense scrutiny over the past few years. The trial, in particular, was a culmination of his ongoing battles with regulators, investors, and the media. But it wasn't just about the legal ramifications. The trial was a test of Musk's resilience. It was a moment that could either define his legacy or shatter it completely. As the courtroom filled with tension, Musk sat in silence, his mind racing. He wasn't worried about the accusations being thrown at him. He had faced far worse in his career. What concerned him more was the larger picture. The forces at play behind the scenes, the powerful individuals who were pulling strings, and the long-term consequences of this trial for his companies and his vision. But Musk had a secret, something he had never shared with the public. It was a secret that connected him to the highest levels of government. The USSS badge was a symbol of that connection, one that had given him access to a world few could even dream of entering. It was the ultimate trump card. And now, in this moment of crisis, Musk was prepared to play it. The USSS badge had not been given to him casually. It wasn't a political move or a publicity stunt. It was part of a deeper connection Musk had cultivated over the years, one that involved not just business, but national security, technological innovation, and the future of space exploration. The truth was, Musk's role in shaping the future of humanity was so intertwined with the government's own interests that it was almost impossible to separate the two. As Musk thought about the path that had led him here, he couldn't help but wonder, was this trial just a coincidence? Or was it part of something larger, something more orchestrated than anyone realized? He glanced down at the USSS badge in his hand. The cold metal gleamed under the harsh courtroom lights, a reminder of the power he wielded. Not just as a businessman, but as someone who had become integral to the future of his country. And just like that, Musk knew that the game had changed. The moment he revealed that badge, everything was different. The trial, the media, the world, they had all just been thrown into a new reality. And the stakes had just become higher than anyone could have anticipated. As the judge looked at him, his expression unreadable, Musk's thoughts were clear. This was no longer just about defending his reputation. It was about something much bigger, something that no one had seen coming. The courtroom was still, the atmosphere thick with tension as everyone processed what had just transpired. The USSS badge that Elon Musk had revealed had changed the dynamics of the entire trial in an instant. The gasps of surprise were replaced by silence, and the eyes of everyone in the room were locked on Musk. For a brief moment, the judge, an experienced and no-nonsense man, seemed disoriented. His earlier composure had faltered. The prosecutor, who had been so confident moments ago, stood motionless, staring at the badge in disbelief. The defense attorney, sitting next to Musk, shifted uneasily in his seat. The court reporter paused mid-typing. No one knew what to do or say. The one thing everyone knew for sure was that the stakes had just risen exponentially. Musk, however, remained calm. His demeanor hadn't shifted, even in the face of the courtroom's shocked silence. He simply leaned back in his chair and folded his arms across his chest, as if daring anyone to challenge him. There was no panic, no indication that this revelation had been an impulsive decision. This was part of the plan. He had been waiting for this moment, and now that it had arrived, he was in control. The judge cleared his throat and, after what felt like an eternity, finally spoke. "Mr. Musk, I must ask, what is the meaning of this?" His voice, though authoritative, betrayed a hint of uncertainty. It wasn't every day that a billionaire tech mogul waltzed into a courtroom and flashed a USSS badge, and it certainly wasn't the kind of situation a judge was prepared to deal with. Musk raised his eyebrows and looked the judge directly in the eyes. "Your Honor," he said calmly, his voice smooth and confident, "I'm here today not only as the CEO of multiple companies, but also as someone who is connected to the national security apparatus of this country. This badge represents a relationship that has existed for years. It's not just a symbol of protection. It's a reflection of the work I've done that is intertwined with the government's interests. This trial, in many ways, is bigger than any of us realize." A murmur ran through the courtroom as the weight of Musk's words sank in. The prosecutor's face darkened, but he didn't interrupt. Musk continued, his eyes not leaving the judge. "I won't go into the specifics of why I've been given this level of access, but I can assure you that it is vital to my work, and more importantly, to the future of this country. This trial, while focused on business and personal allegations, is only the surface of something much larger." The judge, though still reeling from the unexpected revelation, nodded slowly. He had been a judge for decades and had seen more than his fair share of surprises in the courtroom. But this was something entirely different. The implications of what Musk was suggesting were enormous. If Musk's connections ran as deep as he implied, then the entire case could be a pawn in a much more significant political and corporate chess game. "I must request that you elaborate on this connection, Mr. Musk," the judge finally said, his voice cautious but still authoritative. Musk paused, his gaze sweeping over the room. The media representatives in the back were feverishly scribbling notes, but Musk knew that no one was truly prepared for the full extent of what he was about to reveal. He had always been a man of vision. Some would say too far-reaching. But this moment, this trial, had the potential to expose even more than he had intended. "There are certain things," Musk began slowly, "that are classified. My companies, especially SpaceX and Tesla, are involved in projects that, though often framed as private ventures, intersect heavily with government programs. The United States government, both military and intelligence, has a vested interest in these technologies. I have worked on projects that involve space exploration, clean energy, and even defense technologies. The work I've done has implications that go beyond the private sector." The audience was silent. Some of the reporters exchanged quick, incredulous glances, while others typed furiously on their devices. But the focus remained on Musk and his calm, almost serene, delivery. "As a result," Musk continued, "I have been given certain privileges. It's not just about protection. It's about ensuring that the work I do can be conducted in the best interest of national security. So, when you ask why I am showing you this badge, it's because this trial, while it may appear to be about accusations, is actually part of a larger story. One that involves not only my companies, but the very future of our nation." A ripple of disbelief ran through the room. The implications were staggering. Was Musk suggesting that the trial was being manipulated or influenced by the government? That his status wasn't just a result of business acumen, but of deep, unspoken ties to the powers that be? The prosecutor, after a long pause, finally regained his composure. He stood up, adjusting his tie as he prepared to respond. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice sharp, "what you're implying is beyond the scope of this trial. This court has no jurisdiction over matters involving national security or government ties. If you believe this trial is somehow connected to those matters, I suggest you take it up with the appropriate authorities. But for now, we are here to address the charges you face, which are criminal in nature." Your connections are irrelevant. Musk didn't flinch. He had expected this response. The prosecutor was a man of narrow focus. He dealt in facts, not the kind of broad, world-changing implications Musk was hinting at. The judge, sensing the potential for this to devolve into an argument, intervened. "Gentlemen, let's proceed with caution," he said, his voice authoritative once again. "Mr. Musk, you've made a significant claim, one that I will have to consider in light of the charges at hand. But we are here to address the matter of your alleged actions and the legal implications of those actions. The court cannot be derailed by speculation about your connections." Musk nodded, acknowledging the judge's request. He wasn't surprised by the prosecutor's reaction, but the seed had been planted. The revelation that Musk was not only a business mogul but also a man whose work had direct ties to national security was something that would stay with the room, with the media, and with the public. This trial, Musk realized, wasn't about winning or losing in the traditional sense. It was about something far more significant, a battle for control over narratives, over power, and over the future. The government, the media, the public, they were all watching. And Musk knew that, in this moment, he had already made his move. As the judge signaled for the trial to resume, Musk leaned back in his chair once more, his eyes focused forward. Whatever came next, he was ready. He had stepped into this courtroom knowing that there were forces at play far larger than anyone in the room could comprehend. And now, it was time to see just how deep the rabbit hole really went. But Musk had no doubt. He was no longer just a defendant in a courtroom. He was a man in control of a much bigger story, and the world was about to find out just how much bigger that story truly was. As the courtroom buzzed with whispers and confused murmurs, Elon Musk remained calm. He had expected the shock, the disbelief, even the skepticism. What was unfolding before them all was not just a court case. It was a chess game, and he was several moves ahead. But as he sat there, the weight of the moment began to settle on him. He had never imagined he'd find himself in this kind of scenario. Musk had always been a master of managing crises, but this was something new. His empire, his legacy, and the future of his companies were now in the balance. The stakes were higher than he had ever anticipated. The trial was supposed to be about a few allegations, accusations about misleading investors, a lawsuit about a tweet, and some contractual disputes. But the moment he revealed his USSS badge, everything shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't just a matter of business ethics or corporate responsibility. It was a matter of national security, geopolitics, and, as he had hinted, a much more complicated web of power. The judge had called for a brief recess to allow everyone a moment to collect their thoughts. Musk's legal team huddled with him, their faces a mix of confusion and cautious optimism. No one knew exactly where this was going, but everyone could feel that this was no longer just a typical courtroom proceeding. Mr. Musk, his lead attorney, James Mercer, said, "I'll be honest, I've never seen anything like this. You just put a target on your back. Do you realize how far-reaching this could get?" Musk glanced at Mercer, his expression still calm. "I know, but I also know that the truth is far more complex than what anyone thinks. If we let this trial go down the path the prosecution wants, we'll all be playing their game. I have a bigger plan, James, and this is the first move. I need to make sure the world knows the full scope of what's at stake." Mercer sighed, rubbing his temples. "This isn't a boardroom, Elon. You can't just drop bombs and walk away. You've just introduced the federal government into the mix. The media's going to have a field day with this." Musk didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the courtroom doors, lost in thought. He had been through countless challenges in his life, from SpaceX's failed launches to Tesla's near bankruptcy. But this was different. The consequences were larger. The government's role, the military's interests, the intelligence agencies, he wasn't just up against corporate rivals now. He was playing a game of survival in a world where the stakes were national, even global. The recess ended, and everyone returned to their seats. The judge, who had been consulting with the court's higher-ups, returned to the bench. He was no longer as composed as he had been before. The air in the courtroom was thick, laden with anticipation. "Mr. Musk," the judge began, his voice more cautious than before, "I'm aware that what you've stated today has far-reaching implications. However, We are here to address the charges at hand. We cannot allow this court to be distracted by unproven assertions. I must remind you that you are still under oath." Musk stood, his movements deliberate, as he prepared to speak. The judge's warning was clear. But Musk's intention was not to derail the trial. It was to steer it in a direction that would benefit him. He had learned long ago that when you had the cards, you played them wisely. "Your Honor," Musk said, his voice steady and measured, "I understand the need to stay focused on the matter at hand. However, I need to make one thing clear. The charges against me are not what they seem. This is about more than just a tweet or an investment dispute. This is about the future. The very technologies that I've spent my life working on are at the intersection of national security, space exploration, and energy innovation. These are not just business concerns. They are strategic imperatives for the United States and, frankly, the world." The room fell silent again. Musk's words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The judge looked at him closely, as though weighing his words. "I understand," the judge replied after a long pause. "But I must remind you, Mr. Musk, that we are in a court of law. If you have evidence to support these claims, I expect it to be presented in due time. Until then, we will proceed with the trial." Musk nodded slowly. This was precisely what he had expected. The legal battle would continue, but he had already shifted the narrative. The prosecutor, still visibly rattled, stood up, his voice shaky as he began speaking. "Your Honor, if I may," the prosecutor said, his hands trembling slightly, "we cannot allow the court to be influenced by such dramatic assertions without any real evidence. Mr. Musk's actions today appear to be a deliberate attempt to obfuscate the real issues at hand. He is not above the law, and these accusations," he paused, his gaze flicking to the jury and then back to Musk, "are serious. We need to focus on what brought us here today." Musk could see the prosecutor's attempt to regain control. He knew this was coming. This was part of the dance. But Musk had already set the stage, and it was too late to backtrack. The courtroom was no longer just focused on his alleged corporate misdeeds. It was focused on the larger questions he had raised. "Your Honor," Musk interjected smoothly, "I will present the evidence when the time is right. But the truth is, the government is involved in this case, whether we want to admit it or not. My companies are too valuable, too intertwined with national interests, to be dealt with in the simple terms of corporate litigation." The prosecutor scowled but refrained from commenting. The judge, meanwhile, seemed to be deep in thought. His eyes narrowed as he considered the weight of Musk's statements. "Let's proceed," the judge finally said, his tone more resolute. "We'll move forward with the charges, but I expect no further distractions. Mr. Musk, if you wish to introduce evidence related to your claims, you may do so in the proper manner." The trial resumed, but the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. Musk had thrown a wrench into the proceedings, but he knew that the battle was far from over. His mind raced with the next steps. This wasn't about clearing his name. It was about something much larger. The world was watching. The media was already reporting his USSS badge reveal as a game-changing moment. And while the prosecution continued to press on with their case, Musk knew that the future of his companies, and potentially the future of technological innovation itself, would hinge on how he played the next hand. As the trial dragged on, Musk couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer just a participant in this legal drama. He was now a player in a game of global proportions, a game where the prize was nothing short of the future itself. And as he glanced over at the prosecutor, he couldn't help but think, this wasn't just about winning. It was about reshaping the rules of the game. The hours in the courtroom felt like days. Each witness called to the stand, each argument presented, seemed to pass in a blur. But in Elon Musk's mind, there was a sharp, focused clarity that only grew with each passing moment. His goal wasn't simply to defend himself against the accusations. His mission was far more profound. The court, the media, and the public were all watching a single man reshaping the narrative of an entire trial. They just didn't know it yet. It wasn't just a corporate lawsuit. It was a battle for control of the technologies that would define the future. The world wasn't prepared for the full scope of what Musk was involved in. The judge had made it clear that they would proceed with the case, But the introduction of his USSS badge had irrevocably altered the direction of the trial. Musk could sense the growing unease among the prosecution and the subtle shift in the demeanor of the court. This wasn't just a legal confrontation anymore. It was a high-stakes game of chess with far more than just corporate stakes on the line. The media coverage exploded after the trial session ended. Every news outlet, from the most serious political platforms to tabloid reporters, was covering the Elon Musk USSS incident. The implications of what Musk had revealed were enormous. Some outlets speculated that Musk was being investigated by the government for his ties to national security, while others theorized he might have been secretly collaborating with intelligence agencies for years. Musk's personal brand had been linked to some of the most advanced technologies on the planet, and now, the public wanted to know how deep his connections went. As Musk's legal team retreated to strategize during breaks, the courtroom was a hive of activity. In the back corner, reporters clustered around their phones and computers, typing rapidly. Everyone wanted an angle, a soundbite, or an exclusive insight into what Musk's move meant for the future of technology and for national security. But no one had the full picture. James Mercer, Musk's lead attorney, stood apart from the group, his brow furrowed in thought. "I've been going over our options, Elon," Mercer said, his voice low. "We've shifted the narrative, but I'm worried we're walking a dangerous line. The moment you pulled that badge, you became a symbol of something far bigger than yourself. The government, the media, it's not just the court case anymore. You're now in the crosshairs." Musk didn't respond right away. He understood the gravity of what Mercer was saying. The USSS badge had been a calculated risk, one that might have seemed reckless, but in Musk's mind, it was a necessary move. He had anticipated the growing pressure and media storm, but it was precisely this pressure that would force people to start looking beyond the obvious. They needed to understand the bigger picture. "I know," Musk said, his voice steady but resolute. "But this is bigger than just me or this trial. If we let the narrative stay focused only on the charges, we miss the chance to expose what's really at play here. This is about control. It's about the future of energy, space exploration, and the next generation of technologies. If I can't make them see that, then I'll be buried under the weight of these charges." Mercer nodded, still unsure. "But you're playing with fire, Elon. If the government thinks you've overstepped, if they think you've crossed a line by involving them in this trial, you're going to have a far bigger problem than what's on that docket." Musk's eyes flicked toward the courtroom doors, his mind already turning. "It's not about crossing lines, James. It's about creating a new one. I've been playing within the boundaries for too long. The government, the military, they've been playing their own game. But it's time to change the rules. This trial is just a part of that." The conversation ended there. There was nothing more to be said. Musk knew the risks he was taking, but in his mind, the greater risk was in staying silent and letting the world believe this trial was just about a few business disagreements. He had bigger plans, and he wasn't about to back down now. As the next phase of the trial began, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The media had been briefed on Musk's claim of national security involvement, but the full story had yet to unfold. The prosecution's arguments were becoming more aggressive, attempting to discredit Musk's character and accuse him of using his public persona as a smokescreen. But Musk's legal team was ready, presenting evidence that would keep the trial focused on the core issues. However, every time Musk took the stand, he could feel the energy in the room change. There were no more simple questions. Every inquiry, every line of questioning, felt like it carried the weight of the entire national conversation. The trial wasn't just about his guilt or innocence anymore. It was about exposing the forces at play behind the scenes. In the middle of the proceedings, the prosecution attempted to introduce a new set of documents, evidence they claimed would prove Musk's direct involvement in schemes to manipulate the stock market. It was a powerful move. The courtroom erupted into whispers, and Musk's legal team immediately moved to object, demanding the documents be scrutinized for authenticity. But Musk wasn't concerned with the documents themselves. The real game was in how the public would interpret them. The accusations, whether true or false, were now secondary. The question on everyone's mind was not whether Musk had made a mistake, but whether he was deliberately playing a larger game with forces that none of them understood. The judge allowed a brief recess to review the new evidence, and as everyone shuffled out of the courtroom, Musk remained seated, his eyes scanning the room. The weight of the situation was hitting him with full force now. What had begun as a legal battle had become something else entirely. It wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about revealing a bigger story, a story that no one had fully grasped yet. And as he glanced over at the prosecutor, who was whispering fiercely to his team, Musk's mind raced. He could almost hear the click of the pieces falling into place. The prosecution had no idea what they were up against. They were playing checkers, while Musk was already several moves into a far more complicated game. When the trial resumed, the intensity was palpable. The judge looked weary, but he knew this was no ordinary case. The entire nation was watching, and soon, the entire world would be. Musk could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Something was changing, and the next move would determine the direction in which this game would go. The prosecution began its questioning once again, more cautious now, aware that Musk's claims had cast a shadow over their case. They tried to play their hand, accusing Musk of using his connections for personal gain, of exploiting his relationship with the government to manipulate the public and mislead investors. But Musk didn't flinch. He remained cool, composed, and in control. "You're missing the point," he said calmly, his voice carrying through the courtroom. "This isn't about me. This is about the future of everything we've been working toward. You think this trial is the issue? It's only a small part of the story. The world is changing, and you're focused on an individual, not the bigger picture." The prosecution stammered, unable to respond with any real conviction. Musk had shifted the debate. They were no longer simply trying to indict him. They were trying to catch up to him. And Elon Musk knew that the tide was turning. He had taken the first step in a battle that would stretch far beyond this courtroom. The game was just beginning, and Musk was ready for whatever came next. The next day of the trial brought an air of tense anticipation. The courtroom felt different, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The previous day's events had shaken things up, but what was coming next would make the world stop and take notice. Elon Musk could sense the shifting tides. The media, which had been sensationalizing the courtroom drama, was now looking at him not just as a tech billionaire, but as a symbol of something far more mysterious, something larger than life. Musk wasn't here just to play the game. He was changing the game. He knew the risks of revealing too much at once, but he also knew that now was the moment to push the boundaries. The world needed to understand the forces he was up against. As the court was called into session, Musk's attorney, James Mercer, leaned in. "Today's the day. If we don't land this move just right, we risk losing the upper hand. You've set the stage, but now we need to make sure they see what you're really fighting for." Musk gave a brief nod. He knew that this wasn't just about winning the trial. It was about altering the course of history itself. And so, with cool determination, he stood, preparing himself for what was about to come. The prosecutor, still recovering from the previous day's emotional roller coaster, looked warily at Musk. The shift in the room's energy was palpable. The questioning from the prosecution began, though they were noticeably more cautious. They now knew that Musk wasn't just a businessman to be cornered with technicalities or small-time allegations. He was something much more complex. "You've stated repeatedly that this trial is about more than just business transactions, Mr. Musk," the prosecutor began, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "That it involves national security, technology, and even the future of global governance. But with all due respect, how do you expect this court to take those claims seriously without substantial evidence?" Musk smiled slightly, his gaze unwavering. "I've already given you evidence," he said smoothly. "You just haven't been listening." The room went still, and a few gasps could be heard from the gallery. Musk's legal team exchanged looks. He was taking a risk, but it was one he felt was necessary. He wasn't here to defend himself in the usual way. This trial wasn't about justifying past actions. It was about unveiling the future, a future that he alone seemed to understand. Turning his attention back to the judge, Musk added, "Your Honor, I've been waiting for the right moment to present the truth. This trial, the charges against me, are a smokescreen. What you need to understand is that we're dealing with something much bigger than financial records and market behavior. This goes far beyond any legal dispute over a tweet or a product launch. What we're facing now is the evolution of global power, technology, space, and energy are converging, and the very framework of the future is being reshaped in ways no one is talking about. The judge's eyes narrowed, as if weighing Musk's words. The prosecution seemed momentarily speechless. There was a deep, unsettling silence that spread throughout the room, as though every individual was suddenly aware that they were on the precipice of something monumental. "I'm going to make this clear," Musk continued, his voice growing steady with resolve. "I have seen things, projects, partnerships, and technologies that make the charges in this courtroom seem like child's play. You think we're in a court of law? No, we're in the middle of a much larger game. And if you don't recognize that, you'll miss the point entirely." The judge cleared his throat, his expression serious. "Mr. Musk, I understand your frustrations, but we are here to address the accusations against you. Please focus on those." Musk didn't back down. "I am," he said, locking eyes with the judge. "But the accusations themselves are a distraction. They're designed to keep you looking at the wrong things. You want to know what's at stake? Fine, I'll show you." With a gesture, Musk motioned to his legal team. James Mercer passed a small folder to the judge. The courtroom watched with bated breath as the judge began reviewing the new evidence Musk had requested be introduced into the record. "I don't think you're ready for this," Musk said, his voice barely audible now, but cutting through the tension like a knife. "But I'll give you the truth. All of it." The judge's eyes skimmed over the documents. A murmur of disbelief spread through the courtroom as he began to process what was in front of him. The documents Musk had handed over were not financial records, market analysis, or legal papers. They were blueprints, highly classified blueprints, detailing cutting-edge technologies, some of which appeared to be far ahead of anything known to the public. These weren't just futuristic plans for clean energy or autonomous vehicles. These were designs for space exploration, energy networks, and technologies that could potentially alter the fabric of global power. "What is this?" the judge asked, clearly taken aback. "Where did these come from?" Musk's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Those documents represent the next generation of technology, ones that governments and corporations alike have been working on in secrecy. And I've been right in the middle of it. You've been looking at me as a tech mogul, but I'm not just that. I'm a part of something much, much bigger." The room was in an uproar. Whispers filled the air as everyone began to realize the scale of what Musk had just revealed. He wasn't just talking about business or finances. He was talking about the future of humanity itself, the integration of private sector innovations with government interests, the melding of military advancements with civilian technologies, the secrets that would change the world forever. "I've been involved in projects that would allow us to transition from fossil fuels to sustainable energy in a fraction of the time anyone thought possible," Musk continued. "I've worked with the government to develop systems that will allow us to travel across planets, and I've collaborated with intelligence agencies to create technologies that will safeguard not just the United States, but the entire world." The prosecution, flustered and caught off guard, tried to regain control. "This is absurd. None of this can be proven. These are just documents, fabrications, perhaps. Mr. Musk, you are trying to distract this court from the very real charges against you." But Musk wasn't listening. His focus was on the judge, on the jury, on the world that was watching. This wasn't about the petty charges in the court. This was about showing the world the truth about the future, the truth about his role in shaping it. "You'll see," Musk said, his voice resolute. "These aren't just my projects. These are humanity's future, and I'm fighting for that future." The room grew silent again. The weight of Musk's words lingered, heavy and unavoidable. The prosecution stood still, trying to come up with a response, but they were out of their depth. What Musk had just revealed wasn't something they could easily discredit. This wasn't about wealth or power anymore. This was about something much larger than they could have ever anticipated. For a moment, Musk allowed the silence to settle in, savoring the dramatic shift that had just occurred. The world wasn't looking at him the same way anymore. The trial wasn't just about accusations. It was now about a much bigger conversation, one that would have global consequences. And as the judge stared at the documents in his hand, Elon Musk knew this was just the beginning. The game had changed, and he was the one holding the cards. The immediate aftermath of Musk's bold revelation was nothing short of chaotic. The courtroom had erupted in a frenzy of speculation and disbelief. As the judge called for a recess, the murmur of shock and incredulity filled the air. Reporters scrambled to make sense of the documents Musk had presented, while legal teams and court officers hurried to decipher what exactly had just transpired. Outside the courtroom, the world was in a state of heightened anticipation. Social media erupted as soon as the news broke. Elon Musk's name was trending worldwide, not just because of his involvement in a court trial, but because of the high-stakes game he had just revealed to the public. His bold move had done what no one expected. It had shifted the entire conversation. The question on everyone's lips was no longer whether Musk had committed financial fraud or breached the law. No, now it was, what was Musk truly involved in? Musk sat in the holding room, the noise from outside the courtroom seeping through the walls. He could hear snippets of reporters talking to one another, debating the meaning of the documents he had just presented. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, but Musk remained calm. He had expected this. He had anticipated the media storm, the courtroom drama, and the subsequent fallout. But what came next was even more critical. His legal team huddled around a table, papers scattered in front of them. James Mercer, who had been working alongside Musk for years, was reviewing the aftermath. "Elon, that was unconventional," Mercer began, the skepticism in his tone barely veiled. "You've put us in an incredibly precarious situation. You've shown the court and the world what you're working on, but in doing so, you've opened Pandora's box. The government and the media will demand answers. This could easily escalate beyond the courtroom." Musk leaned back in his chair, his eyes focused and calculating. "I'm aware of the consequences, James, but it's a necessary risk. The world needs to know the truth. I'm not just fighting to clear my name. I'm fighting for the future." "But we don't have control anymore," Mercer countered. "You've given them everything. And the more they understand about these projects, the more they'll want to take control of them. They'll investigate every detail. The government will get involved, and this could go beyond a legal issue." "I'm prepared for that," Musk replied, his voice unwavering. "We're dealing with something much bigger than this trial. I've already made my decision. Now we need to see it through." Mercer paused, unsure how to proceed. But Musk's determination was clear. There was no turning back now. They would have to navigate the storm, but Musk had never been one to shy away from the toughest battles. If this was the cost of revealing the truth, then so be it. Back in the courtroom, the judge had called for a brief recess to allow all parties to process the new evidence. During the break, the media coverage intensified. News outlets worldwide were scrambling to make sense of the situation. The documents Musk had provided were mysterious and highly classified, and speculation about their origin and purpose ran wild. Some reporters suggested that Musk's involvement in top-secret government projects might indicate a far more profound relationship between private tech companies and national security agencies than anyone had ever realized. As the courtroom reconvened, the judge wasted no time in addressing the situation. The room had a palpable sense of tension as everyone settled into their seats. The prosecution appeared disoriented, unable to properly formulate a strategy after the stunning reveal. "Mr. Musk," the judge began, his voice firm but measured, "I must admit that the evidence you've presented is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this in a courtroom before. These documents will require thorough verification and analysis. However, it is clear that you've made a significant departure from the charges in this case. What you've revealed involves matters far beyond the scope of this trial. It raises questions about government involvement, national security, and technological advancements that are not easily dismissed." Musk stood up, his expression calm. "Your Honor, I'm not here to present myself as a hero or a villain. I'm here because the world is at a crossroads. What's at stake is not just the money or the business. What's at stake is the future. These technologies could change the course of humanity, but only if we understand how to manage them properly and if the right people are involved." The judge nodded slowly, clearly contemplating Musk's words. "And do you believe that these technologies should be controlled by individuals, corporations, or governments?" "That's the very question I've been asking myself," Musk replied. "The answer isn't clear. But what is clear is that we can't afford to leave these decisions in the hands of a few who are focused solely on profit or power. We need to rethink how we manage and distribute these technologies for the greater good. The courtroom was silent. Musk's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the moment. His legal team stood at the back of the room, watching as their client continued to reshape the conversation around the trial. Mr. Musk, are you suggesting that your personal involvement in these projects has been driven by altruism? The prosecutor asked, trying to regain some semblance of control. I'm suggesting that I'm not doing this for personal gain, Musk responded. I've never been about the money. It's about ensuring that humanity has the tools it needs to survive and thrive in the future. These projects could change the world, but if they're misused or hoarded for personal power, they could also destroy it. The prosecution shifted tactics, now clearly aware that they had lost the upper hand. They attempted to steer the conversation back to the financial misdeeds they had accused Musk of, but the damage was done. The narrative had shifted, and there was no easy way to put it back in the box. In the hours that followed, the legal teams worked behind closed doors. Musk's defense had introduced a new set of challenges, and the judge knew he had no choice but to delay the proceedings while the new evidence was verified. The media, however, would not wait. They were already turning Musk's courtroom revelation into a global story, an unprecedented leak of government secrets, a clash between corporate interests and national security, and the most high-profile trial in recent memory. As Musk walked out of the courthouse, his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The world was watching, but now, more than ever, he was determined to show them exactly what was at stake. The battle wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning, and Musk would stop at nothing to ensure that the truth came to light. It wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about clearing the path for the future, and that path was far more complicated than anyone realized. As the days following Musk's courtroom revelation unfolded, the media frenzy reached a boiling point. Headlines screamed across news outlets, some in disbelief, others in awe, and many with a hint of fear. The documents Musk had revealed to the court were no longer just pieces of paper. They were a symbol of a new era. The world was now grappling with the question of who controlled the future. Musk's name was now synonymous with something far greater than the world had ever known. He wasn't just an entrepreneur or an inventor anymore. He was the center of a global conversation about technology, power, and control. Was he a visionary working to save humanity, or a dangerous man trying to monopolize the future? The lines blurred as the media painted him in both lights, depending on which side of the debate they aligned with. Back in the courtroom, the trial continued, but it felt like the trial itself had lost its relevance. The case against Musk now seemed trivial compared to the global implications of what he had exposed. People around the world wanted answers that went far beyond the courtroom. Meanwhile, Musk had retreated from the public eye for a brief respite, allowing the chaos to settle before he decided what his next move would be. He knew that what he had done would ripple through every corner of society. Governments, corporations, and individuals were scrambling to understand what he had revealed. And as much as Musk wanted to control the narrative, he knew that the consequences of his actions were beyond his grasp. It didn't take long before whispers of deeper connections between Musk and powerful governmental agencies started to surface. Was he a private citizen, or was he a pawn in a much larger geopolitical game? The fact that Musk's companies, Tesla and SpaceX, had been working with the government on high-level projects for years added fuel to the fire. Could his companies be at the forefront of technological developments that were being hidden from the public? The revelations sent shockwaves through the tech industry as Silicon Valley began to realize the scale of the projects Musk had been involved with. Competitors were blindsided, wondering how much of the future they had been kept in the dark about. Investors, too, were unsure how to react. If Musk truly had access to technologies that could alter the course of humanity, then who would control them? Would the market be able to absorb these innovations, or would they disrupt the status quo in ways no one could predict? In the midst of the chaos, Musk found himself in the crosshairs of political leaders across the globe. Some saw him as a necessary ally, a man who could push the world forward. Others viewed him as a threat to national security, someone too unpredictable and too powerful to be trusted with such game-changing technology. Governments began to reach out to Musk, both directly and indirectly, trying to understand where his loyalties lay and whether he could be persuaded to align with their interests. One evening, Musk sat in his office at SpaceX headquarters, watching the news coverage unfold. The courtroom drama was now the backdrop to a much larger story. The trial had become a distant memory compared to the revelations of the technology he had unveiled. What was once a courtroom case about accusations of financial misconduct was now a matter of global concern. He leaned forward in his chair, hands clasped in front of him, as his closest advisors gathered around the table. They had been preparing for the fallout, but no one could have predicted the depth of the global impact. Musk knew that he was at a crossroads, and every decision he made now could change the world forever. "We need to act," Musk said, breaking the silence in the room. "The longer we wait, the more the narrative gets shaped by others. We can't let that happen. We need to take control of this situation, but we need to be careful. The stakes are too high." James Mercer, his attorney, spoke up. "Elon, I understand your urgency, but you have to recognize that we're no longer just dealing with legal charges. We're dealing with global politics, national security, and the future of technology. You've opened a can of worms that can't be easily closed. There are too many players involved now." Musk nodded, acknowledging the truth of Mercer's words. He had known that the risks were enormous, but he had hoped that the truth would eventually prevail. Now, the world was forced to confront that truth, and the consequences were far beyond anything he had imagined. "We can't back down now," Musk said, his voice firm. "The future is out there, and we can either lead it, or we can let someone else dictate its course. I'll take the risk." Mercer's face grew more serious. "But Elon, the government will be watching you closely. There are whispers of shadow operations, intelligence agencies taking an interest in your work. You might be forced into a position where you have to choose between the future of technology and the survival of your companies. We need to consider every move carefully." Musk understood the gravity of the situation, but he also understood the bigger picture. His companies weren't just about making money, they were about shaping the future. He had always believed that technology had the power to change the world, but now he realized just how fragile that belief was. He wasn't just fighting for innovation, he was fighting for control over that innovation. And in a world that was increasingly divided by politics, national interests, and security concerns, that was a dangerous position to be in. As the trial resumed, Musk felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The judge, aware of the shifting dynamics, had decided to delay the proceedings further while the global conversation about the technology Musk had unveiled continued to unfold. News outlets across the globe were broadcasting stories about the potential implications of Musk's involvement in classified projects. Political leaders were calling for investigations into the partnerships Musk had forged with governments and military agencies. For the first time in his career, Musk felt like he was no longer just a businessman in control of his own destiny. The world was now in the midst of a battle over the very technologies that could redefine the future. And that battle wasn't just about who had the most money or the most power. It was about who would control the most dangerous technologies on the planet. Musk sat quietly in the courtroom, knowing that this was just the beginning of a much larger fight. The outcome of this trial no longer mattered in the way it once had. What mattered now was the future, and who would decide how that future would unfold. The stakes had never been higher, and Musk was ready to face whatever came next. The world was watching Elon Musk, and it wasn't just a handful of journalists or tech enthusiasts anymore. Global leaders, security agencies, and even private intelligence firms were all tuning in. Musk had inadvertently triggered a series of events that would put the future of technology and politics in an unpredictable spin. The chaos that followed his courtroom revelation only intensified. Public opinion was divided down the middle. Some saw Musk as a modern-day hero, a champion of progress who was willing to take risks for humanity's future, while others feared his unchecked power and influence. Conspiracy theories swirled, questioning whether Musk was working with, or against, global superpowers, whether he was an agent for a shadow government or a visionary trying to free the world from the constraints of traditional power structures. Musk had quickly realized that what had started as a courtroom dispute over financial matters had now evolved into something much larger, a confrontation between ideas. He wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was standing at the crossroads of history, trying to shape the future of technology and its role in the world. In his private office at SpaceX, Musk stood by a window, staring out at the night sky, his mind racing with possibilities and consequences. He'd been here before, facing overwhelming odds, trying to carve a path forward in the face of intense scrutiny. But this time felt different. The stakes were higher. It wasn't just about launching rockets or building electric cars anymore. It was about something far more existential. His phone buzzed on the desk, and Musk turned his attention to the screen. It was a message from the U.S. government. The president's office had requested an urgent meeting. Musk knew what it meant. He wasn't just being asked to talk about his companies or his innovations. He was being summoned to discuss the future of his projects, of the technologies he had uncovered, and of his growing influence. He quickly replied, agreeing to the meeting. There was no turning back now. The conversation had moved into a different arena, and he was going to have to face the players who held the power to shape his future. The following day, Musk arrived at the White House. The streets around the area were barricaded, security tightened, and there was an air of tension that hung heavy in the air. Musk's heart beat faster as he entered the building, knowing that the meeting ahead would set the course for everything that came next. Inside the Oval Office, President Samantha Hale sat behind the resolute desk, flanked by key members of her national security team. The room was filled with an aura of authority, but there was also a palpable sense of urgency. Everyone knew what was at stake. Mr. Musk, President Hale began, her voice calm but firm, "Thank you for coming on short notice. We've all been following your recent court case, and I have to say, what you've revealed is unexpected." Musk nodded, not surprised by her frankness. "I didn't intend for any of this to unfold this way, but sometimes the truth comes out whether we're ready for it or not. The future isn't something we can control with the same old methods anymore." Hale leaned forward, her fingers steepled in front of her. "And yet, the truth you've revealed has implications that go far beyond what you might have intended. You've shown that you've been involved in some very sensitive government projects that have far-reaching consequences for national security." Musk met her gaze. "I didn't reveal anything that wasn't already known by a few. The technologies we're working on, well, they're not just about making money. They're about solving problems that go beyond national borders. Climate change, space exploration, renewable energy. These things affect every person on this planet." "I'm not here to debate your motives, Mr. Musk," Hale interjected, her voice gaining an edge. "What I need to know is whether you plan to continue with these projects, and if so, how you intend to ensure that they don't fall into the wrong hands. Because as much as you want to frame this as a global solution, there are people in the world who might not agree with your vision." Musk understood what she was implying. The government wasn't just concerned with Musk's work. They were concerned about the fact that his projects had the potential to shift the balance of power. National security agencies didn't take kindly to rogue technologists controlling technologies that could alter the geopolitical landscape. "I'm not trying to undermine any government," Musk replied, his tone measured. "I've always believed that progress happens best when we collaborate, not when we isolate ourselves. My goal is to ensure that we don't let the future be dictated by a handful of powerful interests. It should be for the benefit of all humanity." Hale's expression softened slightly, though the skepticism remained. "I understand your ideals, Mr. Musk, but ideals don't always align with reality. There are people who will see your work as a threat, and if those people are in positions of power, they will do whatever it takes to protect their interests. You need to understand that." Musk's jaw clenched as he processed her words. He had heard it before. People in power fearing change, afraid of losing control. But Musk had never been one to back down from a challenge. He knew that the world was changing, and it wasn't going to be stopped by fear. "Then it's up to us to show the world what's possible," Musk said, his voice unwavering. "I'm not in this for myself. I'm in this to push the boundaries of what humanity can achieve. And if that means confronting those who try to stand in the way of progress, then so be it." Hale exchanged a glance with her advisors, who remained silent as they considered Musk's words. There was a brief pause in the room as everyone seemed to weigh the consequences of this meeting, of this moment. Finally, the president spoke again. "You've made your intentions clear, Mr. Musk," she said. But let me be clear with you as well. The government will not sit idly by while you challenge the status quo. We will work with you on the things that benefit our national security, but be aware, this is not a negotiation about who controls the future. If we see that your actions put the country or the world in danger, we will intervene. Musk nodded, accepting the challenge. He wasn't naive enough to think that the government would simply let him do as he pleased. But he also knew that this was a fight worth having. As he left the White House, the weight of the conversation lingered in his mind. He had made it clear that he wasn't backing down, but the road ahead was no longer just about innovation. It was about navigating the treacherous waters of geopolitics, security, and influence. The stakes were higher than ever before. Musk had stepped into a new arena, and in this arena, it wasn't just his companies at risk. It was the very future of technology itself. The weight of his meeting with President Hale pressed heavily on Musk's mind as he sat in his private jet, looking out over the vast expanse of the Earth below. He had expected a confrontation, but the sheer gravity of the situation was sinking in faster than he had anticipated. This wasn't just about pushing the boundaries of space, renewable energy, or artificial intelligence. It was about navigating a complex political landscape where the lines between friend and foe were no longer clear. Back at SpaceX headquarters, Musk's leadership team had already been briefed about the meeting. It wasn't lost on them how much the stakes had risen. Tesla's projects, SpaceX's plans, and the emerging global network Musk was building. Everything was suddenly under a magnifying glass. His next steps would determine not just the future of his companies, but possibly the future of humanity itself. James Mercer, Musk's longtime attorney, met him at the hangar upon his arrival. He was a sharp, pragmatic man who had been a constant figure in Musk's inner circle. As always, he cut straight to the heart of the matter. "Do you realize the pressure this is putting on you, Elon?" Mercer asked, his voice neutral but intense. "The government isn't just watching you now, they're preparing for a possible confrontation." Musk sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know. It's hard to ignore. But I can't let that stop me from doing what I know is right. The technologies we've been developing, those aren't just for a single country or a single company. They're for all of humanity. If we don't move forward with them, someone else will, and we may not have any say in how it all unfolds." Mercer nodded, but there was a doubt in his eyes. "The world doesn't work that way, Elon. There are far too many players, too many interests. You may have the vision, but others have the power to make things incredibly difficult for you." "I've dealt with difficult before," Musk responded, his voice steadier now. "If we don't take risks, then we'll never know how far we can go. And if I have to fight for the future, then that's what I'll do." The conversation ended with an air of uncertainty hanging in the air. Musk knew that Mercer was right about one thing. He couldn't do this alone, but it was the only way forward, no matter the consequences. The days following Musk's meeting with President Hale were filled with frantic preparations. The global media continued to speculate on his next moves, and his companies were under increasing scrutiny. Musk knew that every decision he made now would be magnified, scrutinized, and potentially used against him. But he couldn't afford to let fear or doubt slow him down. He decided to take a bold step to launch SpaceX's next major project, an ambitious plan to establish a permanent human presence on Mars. It wasn't just about getting people to Mars anymore. It was about making sure that humanity had the capability to thrive beyond Earth, to ensure that technological advances weren't limited by Earthbound constraints. The announcement of the new mission was met with mixed reactions. Supporters hailed it as a visionary move, while detractors questioned the feasibility and the enormous financial cost. The government, already eyeing Musk with suspicion, wasn't thrilled by the move, but Musk was determined to push ahead, no matter the political consequences. While the world's attention focused on SpaceX's Mars plans, Musk continued to deepen his involvement with his other companies. Tesla's push toward autonomous vehicles and renewable energy solutions was now intertwined with his broader vision of global transformation. But as his ambitions grew, so did the pressure from external forces. One day, Musk received an unexpected phone call, a private message from an anonymous source. The voice on the other end was low and distorted, and it sent a chill down his spine. "Mr. Musk," the voice said, "we know what you're doing. We've been watching. You think you're in control, but you're not. There are powerful forces at play here, and if you continue down this path, you will face consequences you cannot imagine. Musk felt a shiver run through him. Who is this? What do you want? Just a warning, the voice replied. You're playing a dangerous game. And the people you're dealing with have no interest in letting you disrupt the global order. The call abruptly ended, leaving Musk with a feeling of unease that he couldn't shake. Who had called him? And why had they warned him like this? He couldn't afford to ignore it. The global chessboard was now far more complex than he had ever imagined, and Musk was at the center of it. In the days that followed, Musk's mind was occupied with the anonymous warning. Who had been behind it? And how much power did they truly wield? The uncertainty of it all made him question the extent to which he was truly in control of his own destiny. He had always been a disruptor, willing to challenge the status quo in pursuit of something greater. But now, that sense of invincibility was tempered by the realization that forces far beyond his understanding were at play. Despite his concerns, Musk continued with his plans, driven by a need to push forward. He couldn't afford to back down, not now. The future was at stake, and there were too many lives involved in the equation. He had to act, even if the consequences were unclear. As he worked late into the night at SpaceX headquarters, Musk's thoughts were interrupted by another call. This time, it was from one of his key advisors, Sarah Clark, who had been monitoring developments on the political front. Elon, she said urgently, we've just received confirmation. The U.S. government has begun coordinating with other nations to form an alliance against any private entities attempting to monopolize space and technology. They're gathering resources for a potential counteraction. Musk's eyes narrowed. The forces he had hoped to avoid were now preparing for a full-scale response. This wasn't just about technology anymore. It was a political war, and Musk was in the crossfire. Do they really think they can stop this? Musk asked, his voice laced with frustration. They're not just trying to stop you. They're trying to control the direction of the future, Clark replied. They'll do whatever it takes to ensure that no one has too much power over the global technological landscape. You're not just fighting for innovation anymore, Elon. You're fighting for control over the future. Musk sat back, his mind racing. The anonymous warning now made more sense. The world was on the brink of a technological and political battle, and he was at the center of it all. The game had just become much more dangerous, and Musk knew that he had to be prepared for what was to come. This wasn't a fight he could walk away from. It was a fight for the future of humanity. And in this fight, no one was guaranteed to win. The battle for the future had begun, but it wasn't going to be fought with rockets or electric cars. It was going to be a battle of influence, secrets, and power. Musk knew that the path ahead was treacherous, and he couldn't trust anyone, not even those closest to him. In a world where information was the most valuable commodity and allegiances could shift with the wind, trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. Despite the growing tension, Musk had to keep moving forward. SpaceX's Mars mission was scheduled to make headlines soon, but the constant political undercurrent threatening his every move had him on edge. The anonymous call he had received still weighed on him heavily, but it wasn't just the shadowy warning that troubled him. It was the realization that those in power were willing to do whatever it took to stop him. Musk's phone buzzed again, but this time it was a more familiar voice. Sarah Clark, his most trusted advisor, had a grim tone when she spoke. Elon, we need to talk. It's about the company. What's going on? Musk asked, his mind instantly alert. Clark was never one to sound panicked unless something serious was happening. We've been doing some digging into your competitors and allies, more specifically, those who have been close to you. And, well, we found something you need to see. Musk's heart rate quickened. What is it? I'll send you the files, but you need to be prepared. There are people inside your own organization who have been leaking sensitive information to the government. They've been feeding intel to government officials and other interested parties, trying to undermine your work with SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink. Musk felt the blood drain from his face. Who's behind this? I'm not sure yet, but we've traced some of the leaks back to key executives and employees who've had direct access to your private strategies. They've been feeding the government, and possibly other global powers, information about your plans. It's big, Elon. We're talking about high-level corporate espionage. Musk's mind raced as he processed the implications. He had always known that there would be attempts to sabotage his efforts, but the idea that it was happening from within his own team was a betrayal of the highest order. "Send me everything," Musk said, his voice cold. "I need to know who's been involved, and I need it yesterday. The clock is ticking." As soon as the call ended, Musk sat back in his chair, staring at the darkened sky outside his office window. He had always operated with the belief that his companies were more than just businesses. They were a reflection of his vision for the future. But now, that vision was under threat, not just from external forces, but from people he had trusted to carry his ideas forward. Hours later, Musk sat in front of his computer, scrolling through the confidential files Clark had sent. The evidence was damning. There were emails, encrypted messages, and even video footage showing several senior figures at SpaceX and Tesla interacting with government officials, seemingly sharing inside information. It was clear that someone had been playing a double game, working for Musk's companies while betraying him to those who wished to see him fail. Musk's fists clenched as he watched the footage. He recognized some of the faces, longtime colleagues, trusted executives who had been with him through thick and thin. The betrayal cut deeper than he could have imagined. "This is bigger than I thought," Musk muttered to himself. He knew that this wasn't just about a few leaks. This was a coordinated effort to take him down. The people who had been leaking information weren't just trying to stop him. They were working to destroy his legacy, his work, and the very technologies that he believed could change the world. He had no choice now. He needed to confront the people responsible, but he couldn't do it blindly. He had to gather all the facts first. The last thing he needed was to make a misstep in this high-stakes game. If he made the wrong move, the consequences would be devastating. Musk knew that time was running out. The next big move would be crucial. If he could figure out who was responsible and stop them, he might still be able to keep control. But if he waited too long, the damage could already be done. The next morning, Musk arrived at SpaceX headquarters early. His mind was sharp, but the weight of what he was about to do hung heavy on his shoulders. He wasn't sure who was in on the plot, but one thing was clear. He couldn't trust anyone without confirmation. As he walked through the glass doors of the SpaceX facility, his mind raced through the possible scenarios. Should he confront the individuals directly? Or should he work behind the scenes to expose the leak without alerting the traitors to his awareness? His first stop was to meet with Sarah Clark, who had been coordinating with the internal security team to track the leaks. Together, they would need to figure out their next steps carefully. "Here's what we know so far," Clark said as she handed Musk a stack of printed documents. "The leaks have been traced to a handful of key figures. Some of them are top-level executives, while others are in critical positions within the tech development teams. We have a few suspects, but we're still narrowing down the exact chain of command." Musk looked over the documents, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the names. One name stood out to him, a former trusted colleague, Thomas Greer, the head of SpaceX's Advanced Propulsion Department. Greer had been with him since the early days of SpaceX, and Musk had always thought of him as a friend. But now, the possibility that Greer might be involved in this conspiracy was a bitter pill to swallow. "Greer," Musk said quietly. "He's the one we need to focus on." Clark nodded. "I thought the same. He's been in contact with government agencies more than anyone else on this list. And his behavior has been unusual. We've already started monitoring his communications more closely." Musk's mind raced as he considered the best course of action. Confronting Greer directly could alert the traitors to Musk's awareness, but waiting too long might allow the leaks to continue. He needed to play this carefully. "We need to gather more evidence," Musk decided. "We can't go public with this yet. If we expose the leak prematurely, it could ruin everything. Let's keep monitoring Greer and see if we can catch him red-handed." As they finalized their plans, Musk felt the weight of his situation settle over him. He was no longer just fighting to innovate or push the boundaries of technology. He was fighting for the survival of everything he had built, and the stakes had never been higher. But Musk was no stranger to adversity. He had faced down insurmountable odds before, and if there was one thing he knew, it was that when the world seemed intent on tearing you down, the only thing left to do was fight back, with everything you had. The battle had only just begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Musk spent the next few days in a state of heightened alert. The discovery of the internal leaks had cast a shadow over everything: his leadership, his vision, and his company's. He couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that had settled in his chest. Every time he looked at his team, he wondered who he could trust and who might be working against him. The investigation into Thomas Greer was still in its early stages, but the information coming in was troubling. Clark had set up a covert surveillance operation, and they were slowly piecing together Greer's connections with outside agencies, including his communications with a high-ranking official from the Department of Defense. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but Musk wasn't about to make a move without irrefutable proof. That night, as Musk sat in his office, staring at a series of encrypted messages on his screen, his mind wandered back to the beginning. He had built SpaceX from the ground up, against all odds. Every launch, every milestone, every success had come with the weight of the world on his shoulders. And now, here he was, fighting not just for the future of space exploration, but for the very survival of everything he had created. "Elon, we have a problem," Clark's voice crackled through the intercom, pulling Musk from his thoughts. "What is it?" Musk replied, already feeling a knot form in his stomach. "I just got word that Greer's been in contact with someone from the government. It's not just any contact. He's scheduled a meeting with someone very high up in the government tomorrow morning, and the timing is concerning." Musk's eyes narrowed. "Where is he meeting them?" "At a secure location in Washington, D.C., Clark answered. "We're trying to track it down, but we don't have all the details yet." Musk stood up, his mind racing. This wasn't just another internal issue anymore. This was a clear move by Greer to undermine him, and he had to act fast. But what could he do? He had no solid evidence to confront Greer directly, and exposing him too early could jeopardize everything. "We need to find out what they're discussing," Musk said, pacing in front of his desk. "If this meeting is what we think it is, we're dealing with more than just a few leaks. We're talking about full-scale corporate espionage." "I'm on it," Clark replied. "I'll get our best people on it, and we'll try to intercept any communications we can." Musk's mind raced as he considered his next steps. There was no time to waste. He had to make sure this was dealt with before it spiraled out of control. If Greer was truly working with the government to take him down, Musk needed to know everything: who was involved, what they were planning, and how he could stop it. The following morning, Musk was in Washington, D.C. A whirlwind of thoughts bombarded him as he sat in the back of his black SUV, speeding through the streets on his way to the secure location where Greer's meeting was set to take place. The secretive nature of the meeting made it even more dangerous. If the government was involved in this, it could mean the end of SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink. Musk couldn't afford to let that happen. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Clark. "We've confirmed that Greer is meeting with high-level officials from the Department of Defense. The location is a secure facility, and we've managed to get a partial audio recording of their conversation. We're sending it over now." Musk opened the message and listened intently. The audio was faint, but he could make out enough to know that Greer was divulging sensitive information. The voices were indistinct, but Greer's tone was unmistakable. He was coordinating with the government, detailing the plans for SpaceX's future and, more disturbingly, hinting at the vulnerabilities within Musk's companies. "What are they planning?" Musk muttered to himself, his heart pounding. "This is bigger than I thought." He knew that the only way to stop it now was to act decisively. He couldn't let Greer get away with this. He couldn't afford to let his entire vision for the future be dismantled by one man's betrayal. Musk's instincts told him that the government's involvement in this was only the beginning, and the true scale of the conspiracy had yet to be revealed. By the time Musk arrived at the secure facility, the plan was clear. He had to confront Greer, but he had to do it carefully. Musk couldn't afford to expose himself too soon, especially with the threat of the government lurking behind the scenes. But the stakes were too high for hesitation. Inside the facility, Musk moved swiftly and quietly. Clark's team had managed to secure the location, and they were monitoring everything from a nearby command center. The goal was to catch Greer in the act. If Musk could get him to confess, he would have the proof he needed to shut this operation down once and for all. As Musk stepped into the darkened room where Greer was meeting with the officials, he felt the tension in the air. Greer was sitting at the head of the table, speaking with authority to a group of shadowy figures. The conversation paused as Musk entered, and all eyes turned toward him. "Elon," Greer said, his voice cool but betraying a hint of nervousness. "What are you doing here?" Musk didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I know what you've been doing, Thomas. I know you've been leaking information to the government, and I know exactly who you've been talking to. You've betrayed me, and you've betrayed the vision we built together." Greer's face paled, but he quickly regained his composure. "You don't understand, Elon. This isn't personal. This is bigger than you. The government is making moves, and they have resources you can't even begin to imagine. You're in way over your head." Musk's gaze hardened. "You think you can just sell out your own company, your own people, for a seat at the table with those who want to tear us down?" Greer shook his head, a sad smile on his lips. "You're too idealistic, Elon. The world doesn't work the way you think it does. You can't just keep pushing forward with your grand plans without consequences. The government, the global powers, they won't let you control everything. They won't let you change the course of history on your own." Musk leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. "I'm not changing history on my own, Thomas. I'm changing it with the people who believe in the future. And you're not one of them anymore." Before Greer could respond, Musk reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button, and the audio recording from Clark's team played loudly in the room, exposing Greer's conversations with government officials. The room fell silent. Musk looked at the traitor one last time. "I'm done. You've made your choice. Now it's time for me to make mine." As Greer stood there, stunned and speechless, Musk turned and walked out of the room, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the silence. He had done what needed to be done. The game was changing, and Musk wasn't about to let anyone get in his way. The fight for the future of humanity had just entered its most dangerous phase. Musk's steps echoed down the sterile, dimly lit hallway of the secure facility as he made his way out. His heart pounded, but his mind was clear. The confrontation with Greer had been inevitable, and now that it was over, the pieces were finally starting to fall into place. But even as he walked away from the traitor who had once been his trusted ally, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far larger. The government's involvement was just the tip of the iceberg, and Musk knew that the shadows had begun to stretch even further. His phone buzzed again, and he glanced at the screen. It was a message from Clark. "Elon, we've got intel that the government isn't acting alone. There's a larger network behind this. Corporations, shadow organizations, even foreign governments. We need to dig deeper. I think the leaks we've uncovered are just a part of something much bigger. I suggest we move cautiously. Call me when you can." The message sent a chill down Musk's spine. He had suspected that there were others involved in this conspiracy, but hearing Clark's confirmation made it all too real. His mind raced through the possibilities. He had always believed that technology was the key to the future, that the power of innovation could overcome any obstacle. But now, it seemed like the very forces he sought to challenge had become the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes. Musk didn't hesitate. He knew what had to be done. He immediately called Clark. The connection clicked, and her voice was steady, though there was an edge of urgency in her tone. "Do you understand what we're dealing with?" Clark asked, her voice laced with tension. "The government isn't acting alone. We've been tracing financial transactions, political ties, even international deals. There's an interconnected web here, Elon, and we're right in the center of it." Musk felt a knot form in his stomach. "How deep does it go?" "We're still piecing it together," Clark replied, "but the evidence points to a coalition of powerful players, corporate giants, intelligence agencies, and even some high-ranking figures in other nations. If they can't control you, they'll do whatever it takes to stop you. And right now, they have everything they need to put the pressure on you." Musk's grip on the phone tightened. "I need to know who's behind this. Who's pulling the strings?" "That's the problem. We don't have a clear picture yet. But it's not just about the leaks or government pressure. There are global financial interests involved here, people who have a lot to lose if you succeed with SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink. They're already working behind the scenes to sabotage your companies and your reputation." Musk fell silent for a moment, his mind spinning. This wasn't just a fight for technological progress anymore. It was a fight for control over the future. And those who feared that future were willing to do anything to stop him. We need to expose them, Musk said, his voice steady, though a fire burned in his chest. We need to gather everything we can and make it public. If we don't, they'll do everything in their power to destroy us. Clark agreed, but she also cautioned him. Exposing them is one thing, but they'll be prepared. They've been watching you, Musk. They know your every move. We have to be smart about this. If we go public without the right evidence, it could backfire. We need to be methodical. Musk took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He knew Clark was right. They had to approach this carefully, but they had to move quickly. The longer they waited, the more time the forces against him had to prepare. He looked out the window of the SUV as it sped through the streets of Washington, D.C. The world outside seemed oblivious to the storm that was brewing just beneath the surface. But Musk knew the clock was ticking. The power players who were working behind the scenes wouldn't rest until they had crushed his companies, and perhaps, even more dangerously, crushed his vision for the future. Clark, set up a meeting, Musk said, his voice resolute. I want to bring in our top people, those who haven't been compromised. We need to form a strategy. We've got to hit them before they hit us. Understood, Clark replied. I'll get the ball rolling. But remember, Elon, these people don't just play by the rules. We have to stay one step ahead. Musk nodded, though Clark couldn't see the gesture. He had always prided himself on his ability to outthink and outmaneuver his rivals, but now the stakes were higher than they had ever been before. It wasn't just about innovation anymore. It was about survival. That night, in a secure meeting room, Musk sat with his most trusted advisors, surrounded by the top minds from SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink. It was a tight-knit group, people who had stood by him through thick and thin. But even in this room of loyal colleagues, Musk couldn't help but wonder who might be compromised. He briefed them on everything that had happened, including the confrontation with Greer and the damning evidence of the leaks. The room was heavy with tension as the reality of the situation sank in. Everyone had heard the rumors, but now they knew the truth. Someone was targeting their companies, trying to tear down everything they had built. We're facing an enemy that's not just going after our products, Musk said, his voice steady but carrying a weight of urgency. They're going after our very existence. They want to erase everything we stand for. One of his senior engineers, Alex, spoke up. So, what's the plan, Elon? How do we fight back? We're going to expose them, Musk replied, his tone fierce. But we're not just going to reveal the leaks. We're going to show the world who's behind all of this. We have to get to the heart of the conspiracy. Clark, who had been monitoring the situation from a secure location, chimed in. We've got our work cut out for us. The financial ties alone are going to take time to unravel, but I've got people working on it. We'll get there. Musk's mind raced. He had always been able to move quickly when it came to innovation, but now he had to think strategically. The world was changing, and the forces that had once been content to watch him grow had now become his greatest adversaries. We can't just react to what they're doing, Musk said, his voice firm. We need to be proactive. We need to make sure that when we strike hard and fast. The room fell silent as his words sank in. Musk's advisors were brilliant, but even they knew that what they were up against was something far more dangerous than they had ever faced. We'll do it together, Musk continued. We've built this from the ground up, and we're not going to let anyone take it away from us. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Musk was no longer just fighting for progress. He was fighting for the future of humanity. And if he had to take on the world's most powerful forces to achieve that future, so be it. As the meeting came to a close, Musk stood up, his resolve hardening. He knew that the coming days would be the most critical of his life. The fight had only just begun, and the battle ahead would determine whether or not he could save his vision or watch it burn. The shadows of betrayal loomed large, but Musk was ready. He had no choice but to press forward, because in the end, there was only one thing that mattered, the future. And he wasn't about to let anyone take that away from him. As the days passed, the pressure only seemed to grow. Musk's life had transformed from one of audacious dreams and groundbreaking innovation to a battle for survival, not just for himself, but for everything he had ever worked for. The stakes were higher than ever. His companies, his vision for humanity's future, and the very trust he had placed in the people closest to him were all under attack. But Musk was no stranger to pressure. In fact, he thrived under it. He was a man who had always believed that the path to success was paved with failure, learning, and overcoming the impossible. Now, though, the odds were steeper than they had ever been. He spent his nights sifting through intelligence reports, reviewing encrypted messages from Clark's team, and coordinating with key figures in the company who remained loyal. The situation had become more complicated than he'd imagined. Greer was just one player in a much larger game. Musk sat in his office, his hands clasped in front of him as he stared at the holographic map of his various operations. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, all of them were in jeopardy, each one tied to the very fabric of his existence. But his focus now was clear. Uncover the network, pulling the strings behind Greer, and do whatever it took to dismantle it. He glanced at the clock. It was nearly 10 p.m., and he had yet to speak to Clark about the latest intel. He dialed her number, his fingers tapping the desk anxiously as he waited for the connection. "Clark," he said once the line connected, his voice low. "What's the latest?" "We've traced a few more links, but it's becoming clear that this isn't just about a corporate sabotage," Clark replied. There was a tense edge to her voice. "We've got evidence of a covert operation involving some high-profile tech CEOs, government officials, and even foreign entities. There's a syndicate, Elon, one that has deep roots in global politics and power." Musk felt his blood run cold. The world he had known, one of tech innovation, free markets, and cutting-edge progress, was now stained by corruption, deceit, and shadowy figures pulling the strings from the dark corners of power. The realization hit him hard. This wasn't just business anymore. This was a battle for the future itself, and Musk was squarely in the crosshairs. He rubbed his temples, trying to focus. What's their endgame? Why go after SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink? What do they have to gain? "We're still working on that," Clark said, her voice filled with frustration. "But what we do know is that they want to control the future of technology. You're a threat to their monopoly, Elon, and they'll stop at nothing to neutralize you." Musk let out a sigh, his mind spinning with possibilities. The pieces were coming together slowly, but there were too many unknowns, too many questions left unanswered. Can we trace the financial connections? If we can show that these people are all in bed together, we might have enough leverage to take them down, Musk said, determination creeping into his voice. Clark was silent for a moment before responding. "We're working on it, but it's going to take time, and we're up against an enemy who has been preparing for this for years." Musk stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the sprawling city below. He had built his empire with a vision of a brighter future, one where humanity could reach for the stars and make the impossible a reality. But now, it seemed that vision was being threatened by forces that were not just after his companies. They were after the very ideals he had spent his life fighting for. "I don't have time to wait," Musk said, his voice steely. "We need to move faster. We need to hit them with everything we've got." "I agree," Clark responded, "but we need to be smart about it. They've already infiltrated key sectors. If we make the wrong move, we could be handing them exactly what they want. A reason to shut us down." Musk clenched his fists. "Then we need to make sure our next move is one they won't see coming." The following morning, Musk called an emergency meeting with his most trusted advisors. He knew that the moment of reckoning was fast approaching, and they needed to be ready. In the conference room, the air was thick with tension. Musk took his seat at the head of the table, his eyes scanning the faces of the people who had helped him build his empire. He could see the concern etched in their expressions, but there was also something else, resolve. They knew what was at stake. "We've been playing defense for too long," Musk said, breaking the silence. "We need to flip the script. We're not going to wait for them to strike. We're going to make sure they know we're onto them. And we're going to make sure they regret ever underestimating us." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Clark, who had joined the meeting via video link, spoke up. "We've identified a few key players who could be behind the conspiracy. The next step is to make sure we have the evidence to expose them, publicly." But we'll need full cooperation from our legal and PR teams to ensure we handle this correctly. Musk nodded. We can't afford to hold back. The world needs to know what's happening behind the scenes. This isn't just about business anymore. It's about the future of our freedom. Alex, one of Musk's senior engineers, spoke up. What about the financial angle? If we can trace the money, if we can connect these players to illicit activities, we might be able to hit them where it hurts. That's exactly what we're going to do, Musk said, his tone firm. We're going to take down their entire network. It's not just about protecting SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink. It's about making sure the world knows what they're trying to do. We'll expose their corruption for all to see. In the days that followed, the team worked tirelessly to gather every scrap of information they could. Clark's team was deep into analyzing encrypted communications and financial transactions, while the legal and PR teams worked in tandem to prepare for the public fallout. Musk himself had never felt more alive. Every decision he made carried weight. He wasn't just shaping the future of space, energy, or AI. He was fighting for the very principles that had defined his life's work. Late one night, as Musk sat in his office, the weight of everything pressing down on him, he received an unexpected call. It was from an anonymous source. The voice on the other end was low, clipped, and unmistakably urgent. I have information you need to hear. I can help you take them down, but you need to listen carefully. Musk's pulse quickened. Who is this? Someone who knows the truth, the voice replied, and someone who is ready to make sure you don't lose. Musk's mind raced. Could this be the break they needed? Could this mysterious source provide the missing pieces to the puzzle? He had no time to waste. He had to find out. I'm listening, Musk said, his voice steady as he braced for what was to come. The voice on the other end spoke again, this time with a hint of finality. Meet me in person. We can't do this over the phone. Musk knew that the next step was critical. He couldn't afford to make a mistake, not now. The clock was ticking. But one thing was certain. The battle for the future had only just begun, and he was going to see it through, no matter the cost. The sun was setting as Musk arrived at the location that had been given to him by the anonymous source. A nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city, secluded, dimly lit, and surrounded by an air of mystery. There was no sign of life outside, just the dull hum of streetlights flickering in the distance. He parked his car in the shadows, casting a long silhouette across the cracked pavement. Musk didn't trust easily. He had built his empire on instinct, often going against the grain and defying expectations. But this meeting felt different. The voice on the other end of the phone had been too urgent, too convincing. If they had the information they claimed to have, this could be the breakthrough he needed. He checked his phone one last time. No new messages, no updates from Clark or the team. It was just him now. The rest was out of his hands. The warehouse door creaked open as Musk approached, revealing a dim hallway lit by fluorescent lights. He stepped inside cautiously, his senses alert, as the door closed silently behind him. His footsteps echoed as he walked deeper into the building, the sound bouncing off the cold concrete walls. At the end of the hallway, a figure emerged from the shadows. The person was wearing a nondescript black hoodie, their face hidden in the dim light. They didn't speak right away, only gestured for Musk to follow them down another narrow corridor. Musk hesitated for a moment, then followed, keeping his distance. The figure led him into a small, windowless room where a single table stood in the center, a few chairs surrounding it. Musk took a seat, the tension rising in his chest. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew this could be the moment that changed everything. The person across from him finally spoke, their voice low and guarded. You're Elon Musk, right? Musk nodded, his eyes scanning the room. Who are you? And what do you know about the people who are trying to destroy me? The figure hesitated for a moment before pulling back their hood, revealing a familiar face. It was Alex, one of Musk's senior engineers, someone he had trusted for years. Musk's mind raced, trying to process the revelation. Alex, Musk said, his voice tight with suspicion. What's going on here? What do you know about this conspiracy? Alex's eyes flickered with a mix of guilt and resolve. I didn't want you to find out like this, Elon. But we've been investigating the leaks for months, and what we've uncovered is much worse than I ever expected. The people behind this are powerful, and they've infiltrated your companies from the inside." Musk's pulse quickened. "You've been investigating? How long have you known about this?" Alex took a deep breath, clearly struggling with the weight of the secret. "I've been working with a group of insiders, people who've been trying to protect the integrity of your companies. But there are traitors in your midst, people who've been leaking information to external groups, to the highest bidders, to anyone who can disrupt your plans." Musk felt the ground shift beneath him. He had always believed that his closest team members were loyal to him. He had built a family of innovators who shared his vision for the future. But now, it seemed, that trust had been shattered. The very people he had counted on had been compromised. "Who's behind this?" Musk asked, his voice steady despite the fury building inside him. Alex looked around cautiously, as if making sure no one was listening. "It's not just a few bad apples. This goes much deeper. The syndicate behind the leaks has ties to some of the most powerful people in the world. Corporations, governments, foreign entities. They're playing a long game, Elon. And their goal is simple. They want to control the future. They want to control the technology you're creating." Musk leaned forward, the weight of the words sinking in. He had always known there were forces working against him, but now it was clear. This wasn't just a fight for dominance in the tech world. This was a battle for the very future of humanity, and those who sought to control it had already set their sights on him. Alex continued, his voice growing more urgent. "I've seen the files. I've seen the money trail. They're manipulating the markets, feeding false information, turning your own allies against you. And they're using your companies as pawns in a much larger game. They've already bought off key players, people who should be your allies. And they're working with government officials to sabotage your projects." Musk's mind was reeling. He had suspected that the government's involvement went deeper than he had been told, but hearing the details from Alex made the situation even more dire. There were people in his own company who had sold him out, and worse, the global forces that were working against him were moving faster than he could track. "So what do we do now?" Musk asked, his voice calm but filled with an intensity that matched the moment. "We expose them? We take them down?" Alex shook his head, his face etched with worry. "We can't just expose them. Not yet. They're too entrenched. They have too many resources at their disposal. If we move too quickly, they'll retaliate in ways we can't predict. We need to find a way to turn the tables on them, to use their own tactics against them." Musk's gaze narrowed. "How do we do that?" Alex looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "We need to strike at their weaknesses. We need to gather the right information. Solid proof of their corruption, their financial ties, their manipulation. But we also need to be careful. If we show our cards too early, they'll shut us down before we can do any real damage." Musk stood up, his mind working overtime as he absorbed the gravity of the situation. His companies were under siege, not just from the outside, but from within. The battle was no longer just about innovation and progress. It was about survival. His survival. "I can't do this alone," Musk said, his voice resolute. "We'll need more support, inside and outside the company. We'll need to build a network of people who can help us take them down, and we need to make sure we're always 2 steps ahead." Alex nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes. We have to move quickly before they have a chance to finish what they started." Musk looked at Alex, a silent understanding passing between them. The fight was far from over. But now, Musk had an ally in this war who was willing to go as far as it took to see it through. The enemy was real, and they were powerful. But Elon Musk had faced impossible odds before and come out on top. This time would be no different. The war for the future had just begun, and Musk was ready to fight. The next few days were a whirlwind. Musk had barely slept, and the weight of the situation seemed to be increasing with every passing hour. He was no longer just fighting for his companies. He was fighting for the future itself. And now, with Alex's help, he had uncovered just how deep the conspiracy ran. It wasn't just a few disgruntled insiders. It was a well-oiled machine, a network of power players stretching across multiple industries, governments, and even intelligence agencies. Musk knew the odds were stacked against him, but he had always believed that when the stakes were high, that was when he could make his biggest moves. It wasn't about playing by the rules anymore. It was about outsmarting the system, exposing the corruption, and reclaiming control of his vision. He stood in his office late at night, his gaze fixed on the holographic screens displaying financial data, communications, and intelligence reports. There were so many connections, so many strings to pull, but it all came down to one thing: getting the right people on his side. He needed allies, both inside and outside his companies, and he needed them now. The situation was fragile. One wrong move, one false step, and the entire operation could come crashing down. But Musk wasn't one to shy away from risk. In fact, he thrived on it. That night, he called a secret meeting with a group of key figures he trusted, people who had always been loyal to him, people who had fought alongside him from the very beginning. Some were from within his companies, others were outside allies he had worked with over the years. He needed them all to fight together if they were going to take down the global syndicate that was after him. The location was a small, secure conference room located in a hidden building on the outskirts of Silicon Valley, far away from prying eyes. Musk knew the risks. If anyone knew about this meeting, the entire operation would be compromised. But this was necessary. If they didn't move fast, the syndicate would have the advantage. When the group had gathered, Musk stood at the front, facing the team. His mind raced as he looked around the room, each person representing a key piece of the puzzle. These were the people who had built the companies that the syndicate wanted to tear down. These were the people who could help him turn the tide. "I don't need to tell you all how serious the situation is," Musk began, his voice calm but intense. "We've uncovered something bigger than any of us imagined. There are powerful people, forces at play, trying to tear everything we've built apart. This isn't just an attack on me, it's an attack on everything we stand for. But I'm not going down without a fight. And I need each of you to help me turn the tables on them." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. The room was silent, everyone hanging on to his every word. "We need to expose this syndicate for what it is. We need to get the right information to the right people, without tipping our hand too soon. Our enemies have infiltrated every corner of the tech world. They've gotten to the people we trust, the people we thought had our backs. But we can't give up now." Clark, his most trusted ally and head of his security team, spoke up. "We've been collecting intel, but it's going to take time to piece it all together. We're talking about powerful individuals who know how to cover their tracks. We'll need to move in a way they won't expect." "I know the risks," Musk said, meeting her gaze. "But we don't have time to wait. If we want to survive this, we need to be one step ahead. We need to fight back now." The room was filled with nods of agreement. There was no turning back. They were in this together, and there was no option but to see it through. Musk continued, his mind already working on the next steps. "We've already started tracking the financial trail, and we've identified some key players who are funding the operations against us. But we need to dig deeper, find out who is behind the money, who is pulling the strings." "There's also the issue of public perception," said Sarah, the head of his PR team. "If we want to expose these people without completely destroying the public's trust in everything you've built, we need to be strategic. A full-on expose might backfire, especially if they have their own media outlets in their pocket. We'll need a controlled leak, something that gets attention but doesn't give them the ammunition to discredit you." Musk nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. We'll need to be precise. We'll release the information in phases, starting with the financial links and gradually revealing more. But we need to make sure we're not putting anyone at unnecessary risk." "And what about Greer?" Alex, the senior engineer, spoke up from across the room. His voice was laced with suspicion. "He's already proven to be a problem, and now that we know the extent of the syndicate, there's no telling how far he's willing to go to protect his masters. We can't just let him slip through our fingers." Musk's eyes darkened at the mention of Greer. The former ally had turned into one of his most dangerous adversaries. Greer had been a trusted confidant in the early days of SpaceX, but now he had become one of the key figures working against Musk. "We'll deal with Greer," Musk said, his voice cold. "But we need to be smart. We can't take him on directly just yet. If we play our cards right, he'll lead us straight to the heart of the syndicate." The room fell silent again as everyone processed the gravity of the situation. This was no longer just about a corporate rivalry. This was war. A war Musk had never expected to fight, but one he had no choice but to wage. His empire, his dreams, and his vision for the future all depended on this fight. "Here's the plan," Musk said, breaking the silence. "We move fast. We keep our heads down, but we hit them where it hurts. We use their own tactics against them. We get the evidence, we build our case, and we make sure they understand that they're messing with the wrong person." The team exchanged glances, each person silently acknowledging the truth in Musk's words. They knew the risks. They knew the odds. But they also knew that they were the ones who could change the outcome. They were the ones who had the knowledge, the skills, and the determination to turn the tide. With the meeting wrapping up, Musk stood tall. "This is just the beginning. We're not backing down. Not now. Not ever." As the group dispersed, Musk lingered for a moment, staring out the window at the city below. He had started this journey to push the boundaries of what was possible, to change the world. And now, he was about to face an enemy that threatened everything he had worked for. But if there was one thing Musk knew, it was that there was no challenge too big for him to overcome. And this time, he was going to take down the people who were trying to destroy him, no matter the cost. The clock was ticking. Each day that passed brought the conspiracy closer to a tipping point, and Musk knew they couldn't afford to wait much longer. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly starting to fit together, but there was still so much to uncover. There were enemies within his own companies, deeply embedded, and each new revelation made the situation even more dangerous. Musk sat in his office late one night, surrounded by monitors, financial reports, and encrypted messages. His eyes flicked back and forth, scanning the data, trying to make sense of the chaos. The syndicate's reach was staggering, and it seemed that no matter how many people he trusted, there was always someone willing to betray him. Alex had come to him with a chilling discovery earlier that day. Someone in SpaceX's upper management had been in contact with Greer. The realization hit Musk like a ton of bricks. The very people who had helped build his companies were turning on him, selling him out for power, money, or simply because they had been manipulated into doing so. Greer had planted moles in the organization, carefully chosen individuals who were feeding information back to him. Musk's mind raced as he sat back in his chair, running over the list of names in his head. The most troubling part was that it wasn't just a handful of low-level employees. The conspiracy reached far higher. Someone close to him, someone who had his complete trust, was working against him. He couldn't let the syndicate get away with it. But how could he root out the traitor without alerting them? A direct confrontation would tip off whoever was behind the leaks, and it would put everyone else in the company at risk. As the night wore on, Musk made a decision. He couldn't just sit idly by and let the enemy dismantle everything he'd worked for. He needed to act, and he needed to act fast. The next morning, Musk gathered his most trusted team members, excluding the people who might have been compromised. They met in a secure conference room, deep within the building. Clark, Sarah, and a few other key players took their seats, their faces tense with anticipation. "I know some of you are already aware of the situation, but we've just confirmed something disturbing," Musk began, his voice measured but serious. "There are people inside this company working for the syndicate. I'm not sure how far this goes, but I have reason to believe the leaks are coming from within." The room went quiet as everyone processed the news. No one spoke, but the tension was palpable. Musk could see the fear in their eyes, but there was also a glint of determination. They weren't going to back down. They couldn't. Clark was the first to break the silence. "Who do you suspect, Elon? Have we narrowed it down?" "I have a list of suspects," Musk replied, his gaze shifting to the encrypted file on his tablet. "But I'm not ready to make any accusations yet. What we need right now is information. We need to know who's been in contact with Greer and who's been leaking data to him." Sarah, ever the strategist, leaned forward. "We need to be subtle about this. If we tip off the wrong person, they'll start covering their tracks, and we'll lose our chance. We need to gather intel, find out who's been meeting with whom, who's been in communication with the outside world. If we play it smart, we'll be able to pinpoint the leak." Musk nodded. "Exactly. We need to track every communication, every movement. And we need to get this information before they realize we're onto them." The plan was set in motion that same day. Musk's security team began monitoring all internal communications, from emails to encrypted messages. Clark's team set up discreet surveillance, monitoring who was meeting with whom, tracking movements around the company's facilities. Meanwhile, Musk and Sarah worked on a strategy to ensure the company's public-facing operations remained stable. After all, the world was watching, and they couldn't afford to look weak in the face of this growing threat. Days passed, each one feeling like a ticking clock. Musk barely slept, his mind constantly turning over the possibilities. Every meeting, every interaction, felt loaded with suspicion. He knew he had to tread carefully, but every instinct in him told him that time was running out. It wasn't until a week later that the breakthrough came. One of Clark's team members had uncovered something subtle but important, an encrypted email sent by one of Musk's closest lieutenants, Mark Ellis, the vice president of operations at SpaceX. The email was short, almost innocuous, but it contained a series of numbers and a code that, once decrypted, revealed a hidden message. Meeting set for tomorrow at 3 p.m. Be ready. The name of the recipient was unknown, but the message made it clear that Ellis was involved in something shady. Clark and his team immediately began tracing the email's metadata, looking for connections that would lead them to the source of the leak. "We've got him," Clark said, his voice grim. "Ellis has been meeting with Greer's people. The messages are encrypted, but we've tracked a phone number to a burner phone that was used to communicate with one of Greer's associates. This is the smoking gun we've been looking for." Musk's stomach tightened. Ellis had been with him for years, helping lead the operations side of SpaceX. The betrayal hit harder than he expected. It was a gut punch, a reminder that even the people you trust the most can be the ones who turn on you when the stakes are high. "I'll handle this personally," Musk said, his voice cold. "We need to confront Ellis and make sure he understands the consequences of his actions. But we have to do this carefully. If he knows we're onto him, he'll destroy the evidence and disappear." Clark nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll have a team ready. We'll monitor his movements, gather evidence, and wait for the right moment to strike." Musk's mind was already working out the details of how to deal with Ellis. The betrayal was deep, but Musk knew that this was the only way forward. He had to confront the traitors, expose the syndicate, and take back control of his empire. It was time to make the hardest choice he had ever faced. But Musk had always known that in this game, trust was a luxury and loyalty was earned, not given. He had to be ruthless now. There was no room for sentimentality. As the team set their plan into motion, Musk stood alone for a moment, staring out of his office window. The city below was quiet, the lights shimmering in the distance. He had always been a visionary, but now, the fight was about survival, and the battle was far from over. But Musk was ready. He had always been ready. The endgame had begun. The days blurred together as the clock ticked down to the moment when Musk would confront Ellis. Every hour felt stretched, filled with tension and anticipation. Musk had always been known for his ability to think fast and act decisively, but this situation was different. The betrayal cut deep. Ellis wasn't just an employee. He had been a key part of his inner circle. To uncover that someone so close to him had been working against him was a bitter pill to swallow. The plan to confront Ellis was carefully crafted. Musk knew that direct confrontation would be risky. They had to be sure that they had enough evidence to make him crack, but also that they could control the situation. If Ellis had been working with Greer, he might be dangerous, desperate, and unpredictable. Clark and his team had been tailing Ellis for days. They had compiled a dossier of his movements, contacts, and encrypted messages, and now they were certain of one thing. Ellis had been leaking critical information to Greer for months. He had been passing on sensitive data about SpaceX's newest projects, financials, and internal strategies. But why? What was his motive? Was he doing it for money, power, or had he been coerced? The confrontation was set to take place at a secluded warehouse on the edge of the city, a place Ellis frequently visited for business meetings. It was the perfect location for the final showdown. Isolated, controlled, and private. No one would hear them, and no one would be able to intervene. If things went sideways, Musk would have to be prepared for anything. The night before the meeting, Musk couldn't sleep. His mind was racing, replaying every moment he had shared with Ellis, the late-night strategy sessions, the long hours spent planning the future of SpaceX. How had he missed the signs? How had he let someone so close to him become an enemy? Musk stood in the dimly lit office, looking at the glowing screens around him. The night felt heavy, almost suffocating, as the weight of the situation settled on his shoulders. He could feel the pressure, the urgency. The stakes had never been higher. At 10 a.m. the next day, Musk and his most trusted team members, Clark, Sarah, and Alex, gathered in the designated conference room. The air was thick with anticipation. Musk didn't speak at first, his eyes locked on the table in front of him, deep in thought. The silence was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. Clark finally spoke, his voice low and firm. "We've got the location. Everything's set up. Ellis will be there in 45 minutes. Musk nodded slowly, his eyes still distant. "This needs to go down without a hitch. We get the truth out of him, no matter what. And if he's not willing to cooperate..." He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. "I know," Clark said, his voice steady. "We'll do what needs to be done, but we have to be smart. We can't afford to lose control." At the warehouse, the air was thick with dust and silence. The building was old and run down, its large metal doors creaking as they opened. Musk, Clark, Sarah, and Alex entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing off the concrete floors. The entire space was dimly lit, casting long shadows across the room. It was a place that felt abandoned, forgotten, perfect for a meeting that no one was supposed to know about. Musk's heart raced as they set up their position. He was calm on the outside, but inside, a storm was brewing. This wasn't just about catching a traitor. It was about protecting everything he had built. His life's work was on the line. Minutes later, Ellis walked in. He didn't seem to notice the team's presence right away. He was too focused on his phone. But the moment he saw Musk standing there, his face froze. "Elon," Ellis said, his voice strained. "What's going on? What is this?" Musk didn't respond right away. Instead, he let the silence hang between them. He could see the tension in Ellis's body, the way his eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape. It was clear that Ellis knew exactly what was happening. He wasn't here by accident. "You know exactly why you're here," Musk said, his voice steady, but the fury in his eyes was unmistakable. "You've been betraying me. All this time, feeding information to Greer. The same Greer who's been trying to destroy everything we've worked for." Ellis's face turned pale, and he took a step back, almost stumbling. "Elon, I didn't save it," Musk interrupted. "We've already got the evidence. The encrypted emails, the burner phone numbers, the meetings with Greer. You thought you could hide it, but you were wrong." Ellis looked around desperately, his eyes darting to the exits, his hand twitching towards his jacket pocket as if searching for something. Musk noticed, and his hand instinctively went to the concealed weapon at his side. He didn't trust Ellis for a second. "Why, Ellis?" Musk asked, his voice colder now. "Why betray me? Why do this to SpaceX, to everything we've built?" Ellis's face twisted in anguish, but there was no sympathy in Musk's eyes. "You think I wanted to do this? I didn't have a choice. Greer, he had my family. He had them, Elon. He promised they'd be safe if I cooperated. But he's a monster. He's been controlling everything behind the scenes. I never thought it would get this far. But now I can't stop it." Musk's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Ellis's family. He had known about Ellis's wife and kids, but he had never imagined that kind of leverage being used. But that didn't excuse his actions. "Not now. You made a choice, Ellis," Musk said, his voice hardening. "You chose to sell out. You chose to betray everything you stood for. And now you'll face the consequences." Ellis collapsed to his knees, his face crumpling in despair. "Please, Elon. Please." But Musk's mind was already made up. The time for pleading was over. Back at SpaceX, Clark and Sarah were already making plans to move forward with the next phase of the operation, handling the fallout. With Ellis exposed as a traitor, there was no turning back. The syndicate was in full swing, but Musk now had a weapon: knowledge. They knew who was behind the operation, and they knew who to target next. But the confrontation had come at a cost. Musk had faced the stark reality that even his closest allies could be tempted by power, fear, or greed. The road ahead would be dangerous, and more betrayals could be lurking just around the corner. But Musk wasn't done yet. This fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It was time to turn the tables. And he was just getting started. The warehouse was silent once the confrontation with Ellis had concluded. As he stood there, watching Ellis despair, Musk's thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions. A part of him wanted to feel sympathy for the man who had been coerced into such betrayal, but the other part knew better. This was the harsh reality of the game they were all playing. Ellis had been broken, but Musk's mind was already moving on to the next steps. He couldn't afford to dwell on the past. The syndicate was still out there, operating with deadly precision, and Musk knew they would stop at nothing to bring him down. Ellis had provided some answers, but there was still so much more to uncover. Musk gestured for Clark and Sarah to step forward. "Take him in. We'll deal with Ellis later, but right now, we need to focus. The syndicate is bigger than we thought. They've infiltrated more than just SpaceX. I have reason to believe their reach goes far beyond what we originally suspected." Clark nodded, signaling to the security team. "Understood. We'll make sure he's secure. But we'll need to move fast, Elon. The more time we give them, the harder it will be to control the damage." Musk looked at Sarah. She had been working alongside him through every phase of this, and he knew she understood the gravity of the situation. "We need to find out who else is involved," he said, his voice low. "There has to be more. If they were able to manipulate Ellis, who else have they compromised?" Sarah's eyes narrowed. "I'll take care of it. We have the infrastructure to track their movements. I'll put together a task force to look into everyone who's had recent contact with Ellis. There are still players out there we need to neutralize." Musk's gaze drifted out of the warehouse's dusty windows, where the city skyline loomed in the distance. The streets seemed so far away, but the danger was closing in with every passing moment. Greer, the syndicate, Ellis, they were all pieces in a larger puzzle. A puzzle Musk had to solve, no matter the cost. Hours turned into days as the pressure mounted. The walls of Musk's office had never felt so confining, and every moment that passed was another where the syndicate could be gaining ground. The realization that the conspiracy ran deeper than even his closest allies had imagined weighed heavily on him. But Musk wasn't about to lose control now. One evening, as the sun set behind the city, Musk received an encrypted message from Sarah. It was short but ominous. "We found something." He immediately called her. "What did you find?" Sarah's voice crackled over the line, her tone tight with urgency. "We traced Ellis's communications. It looks like someone in the government has been involved, Musk. One of the contacts he's been meeting with is an insider, a high-ranking official who's been feeding information to Greer." Musk's stomach dropped. A government insider? This was bigger than he had thought. The syndicate had infiltrated not just his company, but the very systems that were supposed to protect him. "Who is it?" Musk asked, his voice steady despite the shock rising inside him. "We're still working on that," Sarah replied. "But we're close. We need to act fast before they cover their tracks." Musk thought for a moment, his mind racing. "Get me everything you have. If there's a government connection, we're going to need allies. I'm going to need someone I can trust on the inside." Sarah hesitated for a moment. "Are you sure about this? Once we start involving the government, there's no going back." "I don't have a choice," Musk said firmly. "I can't fight this alone. If we don't find a way to expose this at the highest level, we might lose everything. I'll take the risk. Just get me the information." As the conversation ended, Musk felt a surge of determination. He was done being reactive. It was time to go on the offensive. The syndicate had no idea what they were up against. They thought they could take him down from within, but Musk wasn't going to let them win. He had too much at stake. The following days were a whirlwind of meetings, intelligence gathering, and covert operations. Musk, Clark, and Sarah worked tirelessly to unravel the full extent of the syndicate's involvement. They discovered that the conspiracy reached even higher than they could have imagined, right into the heart of Washington, D.C. Musk knew they needed to take this to the next level. The government insider they had identified had deep connections, and he was using those connections to manipulate the flow of information. They had to be careful. This was no longer just about corporate espionage. It was about national security. It was about the future of the country itself. A strategy meeting was scheduled in one of the highest security rooms at SpaceX headquarters. Musk, Clark, Sarah, and Alex sat around a large table, the weight of their mission pressing on their shoulders. "We can't go public with this yet," Clark said, leaning forward. "Not until we have everything lined up. If we reveal this too soon, it could create a full-blown panic. We need to isolate the government official and get them to flip." Musk rubbed his temples, thinking, "Do we have a list of potential contacts? Someone who might help us?" "I've been working with an old contact in the CIA," Sarah replied. "He's not high-ranking, but he's reliable. I trust him. If anyone can help us identify the government official behind all this, it's him." Musk nodded. "Good. Let's make contact. We can't afford to waste any more time." As the days stretched on, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Musk and his team tracked down the government insider, an individual deep within the Department of Defense, someone with access to classified intelligence. They had been feeding information to Greer for months, carefully orchestrating the syndicate's attacks on Musk's companies. The final confrontation was fast approaching. Musk knew that this would be the ultimate test of his resolve. If they couldn't expose the full extent of the conspiracy, there would be no stopping Greer and his network of allies. It wasn't just about saving SpaceX anymore. It was about taking down a criminal network that threatened the very fabric of the nation. But Musk was ready. He had nothing left to lose. The game had changed, and now he was playing to win. It had been a week since Musk's team had uncovered the extent of the syndicate's infiltration, and the weight of their findings was becoming almost unbearable. What had started as a corporate crisis had morphed into something much larger, a high-stakes battle with both national and global consequences. Each move now felt like a chess game, where the pieces were shifting rapidly, and every misstep could lead to catastrophe. The government insider had been identified, Colonel Adrian Marks, a high-ranking officer within the Department of Defense. He had access to some of the most sensitive data in the country, and he was feeding it directly to Greer, who was using that information to fund his own covert operations. What was worse, Musk's team discovered that Marks wasn't just leaking classified information. He was actively sabotaging Musk's projects by discrediting SpaceX's most recent innovations, causing delays in approvals for crucial government contracts. The realization hit Musk hard. It wasn't just corporate espionage at play. It was an attack on his vision for the future of humanity. SpaceX wasn't just a company to him. It was a symbol of what was possible, a dream to make life multiplanetary. And now, that dream was under threat not only from a shadowy syndicate, but also from someone within the very government that was supposed to support him. The team met in the high-security operations room again, the air thick with the seriousness of their mission. Clark was at the front, his usually calm demeanor replaced with a noticeable edge of frustration. He was tired, everyone was. But they couldn't afford to lose focus now. "We've got Marks cornered," Clark said, his voice tight with resolve. "We've tracked his movements, and we've got the leverage we need. He's meeting with Greer tomorrow morning in an undisclosed location. We'll be ready for him." Musk leaned forward, his eyes scanning the monitors. The coordinates were already marked on the map, and there were numerous ways to approach the situation. But they needed to be careful. Marks was a trained military officer. Any wrong move, and they could risk exposing themselves before they had enough evidence to bring him down. "I want to make this clean," Musk said, his voice quiet but firm. "No loose ends. We can't afford another Ellis. Marks knows too much. If he goes to ground, he'll take everything we have with him." Sarah, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "We'll get him, Elon. But we need backup. We can't afford to let him slip away. If he gets a whiff of what we're planning, he'll vanish faster than we can blink." "I agree," Alex chimed in, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. "We need to make sure we're one step ahead. I've been working with a couple of our allies in the intelligence community. If we play this right, we can have eyes on him the whole time." Musk nodded, his mind calculating their next steps. This wasn't just a game of cat and mouse, it was war. They had to move with precision, or the consequences would be disastrous. The following day, as dawn broke over the city, the team was already in position. Clark and Alex had mobilized a small tactical team to surveil the meeting point while Sarah and Musk stayed in a secure location, monitoring the operation from their command center. The tension in the air was palpable as Musk paced back and forth, staring at the monitor. He knew they were getting closer to uncovering the full depth of the conspiracy, but there was still a part of him that couldn't shake the feeling that something would go wrong. He had felt that way before, when he'd made big decisions, when he'd taken risks, and every time, it had been a warning that had pushed him forward. This time, though, the stakes were higher than ever. Clark's voice crackled through the earpiece. "We've got eyes on the target. Marks has arrived at the location. It looks like Greer's already there. We're moving in." Musk's pulse quickened, but he remained composed. The moment they'd been waiting for had arrived. "Keep the team in position," he instructed. "I want this to go without a hitch. If there's even the slightest mistake, we're pulling out. Understand?" "Understood," Clark replied, his voice filled with quiet resolve. Minutes felt like hours as they watched the scene unfold from their monitors. Musk leaned in closer, his gaze locked on the screen. The two men, Marks and Greer, stood together, exchanging words in low tones, their faces unreadable. Musk couldn't hear the conversation, but he could tell something significant was happening. This was the moment. Everything they had worked for led to this. Then, it happened. A car sped into the area, pulling up to the building. Musk's heart sank as he saw the silhouette of someone stepping out, another figure who was now entering the fold. The realization hit him hard. They weren't alone. Someone else had arrived. "Who's that?" Musk asked, his voice sharp. Clark's eyes flicked to the screen, his expression faltering. "I don't know. They weren't on our radar. I'll have the team investigate." But before Clark could finish, the screen flickered with static. For a moment, Musk thought it was just a technical glitch. But then the signal completely cut out. "Clark!" Musk snapped, his pulse spiking. "What the hell is going on?" "I'm not sure," Clark responded, his voice strained. "We've lost the feed. It's possible they've got some sort of jammer. Find them. Now," Musk ordered. Outside, in the shadows of the building, the unknown figure who had arrived wasn't just a bystander. They were someone who had been playing the game for a long time. Musk had underestimated the situation, and it was about to come back to haunt him. The syndicate's network had grown more sophisticated, and their ability to stay one step ahead of Musk's team was proving to be their greatest asset. The sudden interference wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. Someone inside their own circle had betrayed them once again. Musk felt the weight of that truth settle in. He had allowed himself to believe that they had already won. But this was far from over. As Clark's team scrambled to regain control of the situation, Musk knew that they had reached a critical tipping point. There was no turning back now. The final confrontation was approaching, and they were running out of time. The fight to expose the syndicate had just escalated to a whole new level. The silence after the comms cut out was deafening. Musk stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the blank screen in front of him, as if willing the image to return. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of information, calculating risks, and trying to anticipate what would come next. "Clark, status report. Now." Musk snapped into the microphone, his voice low but filled with the weight of urgency. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white from the tension. "We've lost visual and audio feeds. The jamming signal is strong. We're trying to hack into backup systems, but whoever's running this operation is good. They've cut all communication routes. It's like they knew exactly where to hit us." Clark's voice crackled back through the earpiece, betraying a rare moment of uncertainty. Musk's stomach tightened. How had they missed this? For all their preparation, for all the intelligence they had gathered, there was still something, or someone, they hadn't anticipated. The pieces weren't fitting together as they should. Sarah, who had been monitoring the entire operation alongside Musk, finally spoke up, her voice measured but resolute. "We can't sit here waiting for a fix. We need to move. Now. They've got too much access. Whoever just arrived is a game changer. That's someone else pulling the strings, someone who wasn't on our radar." Musk's mind clicked into overdrive. He had to act, but he needed information, and he needed it fast. "We need eyes on the building. All routes in and out. Get eyes on every angle. I want a full sweep." "Already on it," Sarah replied, already moving to coordinate with the rest of the team. Meanwhile, inside the building, things were moving fast. The figure who had arrived, someone Musk hadn't accounted for, had already taken control of the situation. Musk could only guess who it was, but he had a feeling that it was someone with deep connections, someone who had the ability to manipulate events from the shadows. As Greer and Marx spoke, the air in the room seemed to thicken with the weight of hidden motives. "Colonel Marx," a voice interrupted the tension. "I assume everything is proceeding as planned?" Marx turned toward the newcomer. He had recognized the voice, but his face betrayed no emotion. "It is," he replied curtly, his posture stiff, almost mechanical. The man who had just entered was tall, wearing a tailored black suit that looked more like armor than clothing. His presence exuded authority and power, like a shadow that lingered just outside the reach of the light. Musk didn't know him by name, but he didn't need to. This was someone who had been pulling the strings behind the curtain for far longer than he had realized. "You're certain the distraction worked?" the man asked, his tone cold, with a chilling calmness that sent a shiver down Marx's spine. "It worked," Marx replied, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He had no idea who this man truly was, only that he had the power to bring this whole operation crashing down. "Musk won't know what hit him." The man smiled, but it wasn't a smile of comfort. It was a smile of assurance, of someone who knew they had already won. "Good," he said, turning back toward the door. "Make sure the plan stays on course. This is bigger than Musk, bigger than anything he could ever dream of. The future is already ours." Marx nodded, the unease in his chest growing, but he didn't dare voice his concerns. After all, what could he say? This man had power, and power, it seemed, had its own set of rules. Back in the command center, Musk's frustration grew as the minutes ticked by. They had lost communication, and the unknown figure, whoever he was, had thrown the team into disarray. But he knew he couldn't afford to lose control. "Not now. We're close," Musk muttered to himself, more as a reminder than an assurance. The syndicate had made its move, and now he had to respond in kind. The key was figuring out who this mystery figure was. The moment he knew who they were up against, he could turn the tables. But first, they had to track down every piece of information they could. "Sarah," Musk said, his voice suddenly clearer, more determined, "get me everything we have on anyone with high-level government connections. I want every name, every transaction, every whisper." "I'm on it," Sarah replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she began sorting through data streams. A sudden ping from the system caught Musk's attention, and he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Clark's team had managed to get some visual back, scrambled, but enough to give them a partial view of the building. "Can you identify the new player?" Musk asked, barely containing his anticipation. Clark's voice returned, steady but tense. "It's hard to say for sure, but I've got an ID on the man. His name's Joshua Reed. He's not exactly public, but he's been linked to high-profile government contractors. He was involved in defense contracts, and he's been linked to private security firms that handle classified operations." Musk felt a cold rush of realization. Reed. It wasn't just a name. It was a connection to everything that had been happening, a link to the top of the food chain. Musk had suspected all along that the conspiracy ran deeper, but now, with Reed's name surfacing, the game had taken a far more dangerous turn. "Reed is the mastermind behind the operation," Musk said, his voice icy. "He's been manipulating everything. We need to bring him in." Clark responded, his voice filled with urgency. "We'll move in fast, but we need backup. Reed's people won't go down without a fight." As Clark's team prepared for the final push, Musk remained in the control room, watching as his team moved in. The minutes stretched into hours as they waited for the right moment. Every second felt like a ticking clock, and Musk couldn't shake the feeling that the syndicate's next move would come sooner than they were ready for. Then, the breakthrough came. "Sir, we've got Reed's location," Sarah announced, her voice tight with excitement. "We've traced him to an underground facility in the city outskirts. This is it. If we don't act now, we'll lose him for good." Musk's pulse quickened. The moment he'd been waiting for had finally arrived. Get the team in position. No mistakes. We're ending this tonight. The stakes had never been higher, and Musk knew that this mission wasn't just about saving his company. It was about stopping a network of corruption that reached the highest echelons of power. It was about taking control of his own destiny and ensuring that no one, not Greer, not Reed, not anyone, could ever threaten his future again. As Musk prepared for the final confrontation, he could feel the weight of everything he had worked for bearing down on him. This was it, the moment where everything would either fall apart or fall into place. He would not let this battle slip from his grasp. The game was about to change once again, and this time, Musk would be the one holding the cards. The moment had arrived. The culmination of months of investigation, countless hours of strategizing, and navigating the maze of shadows that had threatened everything Musk had built was at hand. His pulse thudded in his ears as the plan to bring down Joshua Reed and the syndicate that had been conspiring against him unfolded in real time. They were close, so close, but it wasn't over yet. Musk stood at the heart of the command center, his eyes flicking from screen to screen. His team was in position, ready to strike. The underground facility where Reed had taken refuge was heavily fortified, but they had spent the last several days gathering intel, breaking down the security systems, and finding every possible entry point. Now, it was time to take the fight to Reed and the powerful people behind him. Clark, Musk's voice was firm, sharp as he issued his final orders. We go in fast and clean. I want Reed alive. I need him to answer for everything. There was a brief pause. Then Clark's voice came through, steady and reassuring. Understood. We're in position. I'll give the signal when we're ready to breach. Musk's eyes flickered to the screen that displayed the facility's exterior. His thoughts raced back to everything that had led him to this point. The shadowy syndicate, Greer's betrayal, the loss of his trusted allies, the countless sleepless nights. But at this moment, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was putting an end to the conspiracy once and for all. In the dead of night, as the world outside remained blissfully unaware, Musk's team began their descent toward the facility. They were a well-coordinated unit, each member ready for whatever might come. Musk couldn't afford to take any chances. If this was going to end tonight, it needed to end decisively. Clark's voice came through the earpiece again, calm but filled with the urgency of the moment. We're inside, moving toward Reed's last known position. Keep your heads on a swivel. The facility's full of armed guards. Musk's gaze remained fixed on the monitors, his hands clenched tightly around the table. He knew his team was well prepared, but there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. He wasn't worried about the physical danger, not anymore. What concerned him was the idea that they might be walking into a trap. This wasn't just about capturing Reed. It was about dismantling a dangerous network, one that had manipulated people in the highest circles of power for far too long. If they failed now, the consequences would be unimaginable. Minutes dragged on as the team infiltrated deeper into the heart of the facility. Each step forward was a step closer to Reed. Every corner they turned was a potential threat, but Musk knew they couldn't afford hesitation. The stakes were too high. They had to press on. Keep moving, Clark's voice came through again, tinged with a hint of something far graver than earlier. We've got eyes on Reed's location. But it's not just him. There's more, lots more. Musk's heart rate spiked. He had suspected as much. This wasn't just a matter of dealing with Reed. If he was surrounded by reinforcements, their mission would become a firefight. He closed his eyes briefly and steadied his breath. He trusted his team, but this would be the fight of their lives. Inside the facility, Joshua Reed moved with a deliberate calm. He knew Musk's team was closing in. There were no mistakes, no surprises for him. He had been one step ahead for too long. The syndicate had planned for every contingency. This wasn't their first rodeo. He stood by a large window, staring out into the darkened landscape, the soft hum of the facility's equipment filling the silence. But even as he waited for the inevitable confrontation, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Musk was too determined, too driven. Something had changed in him. Reed knew that if Musk was coming after him now, it was only because he had already seen the endgame. He adjusted his suit, glancing at the two armed guards who flanked him. "Are we ready?" he asked, though he knew the answer. The guard on the left nodded, tightening his grip on the weapon. "We're ready, sir. But we're not sure how much longer we can hold them off." Reed turned to face the guards, a smirk playing on his lips. Let's make sure we finish this quickly. Musk may have his resources, but he's still a man. And men are predictable. Musk's team finally reached the heart of the facility, where Reed was supposed to be. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the promise of what was about to unfold. Every move they made was calculated. Every decision weighed with the knowledge that one mistake could mean the end of everything. "We're here," Clark reported, a hint of tension in his voice. "This is it." They breached the final door. Inside, they found themselves in a large, stark room. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast long shadows on the floor, and the air was cold, sterile, unnerving. At the far end of the room, Reed stood waiting, a confident expression on his face, as if he had anticipated this moment all along. His guards flanked him, but Musk could tell they weren't as certain as their leader. Clark immediately took charge, signaling for the team to spread out. "Hands up. No one moves." Reed didn't flinch. He simply smiled, a dark, knowing smile. "So, Musk sends his dogs to clean up his mess. How predictable." Musk's voice rang out clear and firm. "This ends now, Reed. It's over. You've been playing this game for far too long, and I'm not going to let you destroy everything I've worked for." Reed's eyes flicked over to the guards, then back to Musk. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you've caught me, but you're too late." Before Musk could respond, Reed's hand moved to the side. With a sudden, sharp motion, he triggered a hidden panel in the wall. Musk's heart raced as a loud alarm blared, signaling a lockdown. Reinforcements began pouring into the room, armed and ready to engage. "Now you see the bigger picture," Reed said, his voice colder than ice. "The war you're fighting isn't just for your company. It's for your life, your future. You won't get out of here alive." The room erupted into chaos. Musk's team was ready, their training kicking in as they moved into tactical positions. A firefight broke out, the sound of gunfire echoing through the walls. But Musk's focus never wavered, his eyes locked on Reed, who was moving quickly toward a hidden escape route. "No," Musk shouted. "We're ending this now." He dashed forward, determination in his every step. With the sound of gunfire all around him, Musk leapt over a fallen guard and pressed forward, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it, the final moment, the end of the line. As Reed reached for the escape hatch, Musk was there, his hand grabbing Reed's arm, pulling him back with force. The two men locked eyes, a moment of raw intensity shared between them. "You're not running away this time," Musk said, his voice filled with a hard resolve. In that moment, everything, every piece of their long, winding battle, culminated in one final clash. The fight wasn't over, but the end had finally begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?